Chapter 359. In the past, he also knew what kind of person Qian Xiaohua was. His only hobby was to play with women. Sometimes, when he worked with him, he would also send a few female artistes under Huanyu to accompany him. But after a few times, did he silently think that as long as it was a woman from Huanyu, he could casually touch her? Mu Yaja's gaze was extremely dangerous. Yun Shishir was stunned for a moment, then immediately realized what he meant. Her face suddenly turned pale, and she shook her head hard, saying that she seduced him? I didn't. She denied it heavily. How was she seducing him? What kind of crime was he accusing her of for no reason? Mu Yaja naturally knew that she didn't, but he just loved to tease her like this. He just loved to see her an angry gaze. She was just like an angry kitten, ready to bare her fangs and brandish her claws at him if he provoked her slightly. It seemed like this was really a bad hobby. He understood it deep down, but he just loved to tease her like this. He just loved to see how cute she looked when she was mad. He smiled slightly, and his muscular arms simply carried her to sit on his body. Then what did I see just now? If I wasn't here, would you have left with him? I wouldn't. How could she have left with him? You're lying. His large palm clasped the back of her neck, and the man's lips curled into a devilish smile. He leaned close to her ear and whispered, If I hadn't arrived in time just now, would you have left with him? Yun Shishir bit her lip. Just as she was about to speak, she lowered her eyebrows. It was only then that she realized how ambiguous and intimate their current position of hugging each other was. The two bodies were tightly pressed together, and there was no gap between them. In an instant, her face and ears were dyed red. Even her fair and delicate skin was slightly flushed. She couldn't help but move back, but he hugged her back to his chest again. Say it. I wouldn't. Why not? He asked again. Yun Shishir said angrily, You wouldn't. You wouldn't. You seem to dislike me? Why? His voice was very gentle, low, and extremely magnetic. It was full of bewitchment. Which part of me doesn't satisfy you? The man's warm breath instantly heated up her small and cute earlobes. Yun Shishir pursed her lips and turned her face away, but he pinched her face. Mu Yaja's eyes gradually darkened. He lowered his head, and the tip of his tongue gently touched her lips were as sweet as always. Answer. Yun Shishir gritted her teeth, but she really couldn't answer. The palm on the back of her neck suddenly pressed down, and she was caught off guard as she leaned in close to his face. Looking at the handsome face was so close. Yun's face. Suddenly lowering his head, the man's slightly cold lips covered her small mouth and pressed against hers. He coldly asked, Do you like that old man? She wanted to shake her head fiercely, but her neck was held tightly by him, so she could not move at all. However, her mouth was blocked by him, and she didn't dare to move for a moment. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes, admiring the helplessness in her eyes. He raised his eyebrows and said, Or, do you like me? Yun Shishir was stunned, and she instinctively wanted to deny it. How could she like this heartless and cold man in front of her? Chapter 360. Seeing her silent reaction, the man smiled devilishly and said in an unquestionable tone, Answer me. Yun Shishir stubbornly refused to say a word, but she suddenly sensed his hand wantonly reaching into her clothes. Her heart skipped a beat, and she subconsciously glanced back from the corner of her eye. However, she saw the chauffeur continue driving as if he didn't see or hear anything. He didn't even glance at the rearview mirror. Every time the man made a move, she would glance at the chauffeur again with lingering fear. Sensing her worried gaze, the chauffeur pressed a button and the partition slowly rose, completely separating the front seat and the back seat. Even so, she still panicked. Don't! She reached out and grabbed his wrist, saying softly, "Not here." From her words, it was clear that she was already giving in. However, Mu Yaja wasn't satisfied with this answer. He held her hand back and continued his actions with her fingertips. Yun Shirshir was embarrassed and annoyed. She struggled, but the strength in his hand was ridiculously overbearing. Thus, she took the initiative to hug his neck with her right hand and lightly pecked his lips. She was taking the initiative to please him again. "Answer me." However, the man was like a devil. He didn't give up and whispered softly in her ear, "Otherwise, I'll do you in the car." Yun Shirshir was stunned. She saw a playful smile in the man's eyes. There was no doubt that he would really do that. Yun Shirshir bit her lip and said softly, I like you." There seemed to be some emotions in her eyes that were struggling and intertwining. However, these words were a little against her will. However, the man was in the mood to tease her. He naughtily bit her collarbone and unscrupulously admired her face that was flushed red due to excessive nervousness. He asked softly, "What do you like about me?" Yun Shirshir looked up in shock and stared into the depths of his deep eyes. "Tell me, what do you like about me?" The man chuckled and pulled her hand downward. Here, as if her fingertips had been scalded, she quickly retracted her hand and said word by word, "No, don't be like this." She looked at his handsome face, and his eyes were fixed on her face. However, she felt that she was so unbearable and cheap right now. Vaguely, Qian Xiaohua's aggressive and insulting words rang in her ears again. She suddenly suspected that in this man's heart, she was also a woman with such an existence. One that was as cheap as a commodity. Once it was labeled, it could be casually traded by anyone. She didn't know why, but she was a little concerned about his thoughts. He saw that she had a lot on her mind, and her expression was extremely solemn. However, she was also a little sad and a little dazed. Mu Yaja immediately retracted his smile. He thought of Qian Xiaohua and wondered what he had said to her that caused this woman to look at him with a gaze that was more or less bone-chilling. He pinched her chin and used a little strength with his fingertips. He was afraid that he would hurt her, so his movements were deliberately gentler. He asked in a deep voice, "What did he say to you?" Those words were simply too embarrassing. She couldn't say it out loud. Seeing that his expression was getting worse, she slowly said, "He just wants me to accompany him for a night." Chapter 361. As soon as she said that, Mu Yaja's gaze immediately turned gloomy. In the restaurant, he had just walked out of the private room when he heard Li Lan's voice. Amidst his astonishment, he also heard Qian Xiaohua's voice. However, as they were too far away, he couldn't hear their conversation clearly. He could only vaguely hear that Qian Xiaohua wanted to take this little woman away. After observing for a while, he stepped forward. However, he didn't know that Qian Xiaohua was actually using the cheapest currency to measure his woman. Yun Shirshir said in a low voice, "Am I like that in your heart too? A woman who can be sold for a price." Seeing that his expression was dark and cold and didn't say anything, she anxiously said, "I'm not a commodity, so don't sell me to others." What responded to her was his ferocious kiss. Without waiting for her to finish her sentence, he fiercely sealed her mouth and kissed every last bit of her broken words. The tip of his tongue recklessly invaded her little mouth and wildly swept across her mouth. His thin lips tightly pressed against her little mouth. He didn't seem to want to give her a chance to breathe. He bit the tip of her tongue and violently plundered her along with her breath. She even thought that she was going to suffocate and faint in his arms in the next moment. Just as her consciousness was about to go blank, he finally let go of her. Yun Shirshir was extremely tired as she laid on his shoulder. Her red lips greedily took in large mouthfuls of air. As she gradually regained her consciousness, she seemed to hear his deep voice. "You're my woman. Who dares to touch you?" His words revealed a bit of arrogance, but also unintentionally revealed a bit of undetectable gentleness. However, she was sensitive enough to feel his gentleness, but this gentleness pierced her heart to the point of pain. She also didn't know why her heart was hurting so badly. It twitched, and she felt a little uncomfortable. The tip of her nose was also sour. This man's domineering protection made her feel an inexplicable sense of security. In her heart, she actually tasted a little bit of sweetness. This man was indeed domineering, but this feeling of being protected in his arms was very good. Asterisk, in the VIP room. In front of the billiard table, a devilishly handsome man gracefully crouched beside the table. The cue in his hand was aimed at the billiard ball. A pair of long, narrow, and soul-stirring eyes flickered with a devilish light. Dong! With a crisp sound of impact, the black 8-ball neatly shot into the hole. Whether it was the angle or the strength, it was impeccable. Gu Jinglian stood up casually, his slender hand gently stroking the cue stick, his lips curling into a playful smile. "Director Yang, why are you just sitting there? You're not moving at all. You should play to your heart's content, shouldn't you?" As he spoke, he smiled and turned around. "Look, I won again. You have no chance again. Hee hee." Everyone looked at his strange and unpredictable smile, disdain and contempt on his cold and elegant face, and they all swallowed with difficulty. Gu Jinglian was smiling, but everyone present felt a chill run down their spines. They were frightened by this man's temperamental mood swings and his mood swings. At the side, in a corner, Yang Shouqing sat on the sofa with a stiff expression. His whole body sank into the sofa, his face pale and his shoulders trembling uncontrollably. Chapter 362. At his feet, there was a corpse lying quietly. Its eyes were terrifyingly wide open. 3 minutes ago, the corpse was still alive. It was one of Yang Shouqing's bodyguards. Now, there was a bleeding hole between his eyebrows. He had offended young Master Gu with one sentence and ended up like this. It was too horrible to look at. Fresh blood flowed onto the floor, filling the room with the thick smell of blood. The temperature of his skin was gradually cooling. The terrifying atmosphere of death enveloped the large room. Qin Zhou looked at Yang Shouqing's ashen face with sympathy and walked to the table to arrange the balls. Ji Lin was playing with a few billiard balls on the side, but he looked as if he was used to this scene. Gu Jinglian slowly sat down on the sofa and lit a cigarette. His slender hand brushed the slightly messy hair on his forehead as he said slowly, "Mr. Yang, why aren't you saying anything? Could it be that Jinglian didn't treat you well enough and you didn't have enough fun?" His body sank into the sofa. Beside him, two sexy girls dressed in sexy and revealing clothes immediately came up to him. Their graceful and exquisite bodies slowly straddled his body, carefully holding his handsome face, and planted a kiss on his lips. Gu Jinglian smiled flirtatiously. His large palm suddenly reached under the woman's skirt and moved up, teasing her body. Yang Shouqing was inexplicably shocked. "No, young Master Gu, you're being too serious. How's the injury on your hand recovering, Mr. Yang?" Gu Jinglian didn't look at him. He was focused on playing with the woman, who kept touching him coquettishly. His tone was chilling. "It's fine now. If Xingzi offended you in any way, tell me. I'll apologize to you on his behalf." Yang Shouqing's face stiffened. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Apologize? Asking the head of the Gu family, the most powerful family in the underworld, to apologize to him wasn't just an apology. It was asking for his life. Yang Shouqing was filled with regret at this moment. He didn't expect Gu Xing's brother to be Gu Jinglian of the underworld Gu family. This was incredible. He had offended someone he shouldn't have offended. Previously, he did not know who Gu Xingze was. He only knew that this young man was very arrogant and dared to challenge him. Who was Yang Shouqing? The godfather of Hong Kong cinema, a legend of his generation. He was the man who dominated the Hong Kong film industry for 20 years. He had been in the entertainment industry for so many years. With his strong background and methods, no one had dared to give him any face. Gu Xingze was the first and only one. After the cocktail party, Qin Zhou had also brought a few of the people in charge of Huanyu to personally apologize. However, Yang Shouqing was proud and arrogant. How could he be appeased so easily? The reason he asked Qin Zhou for Gu Xingze was because he wanted to get Gu Xingze to come over and teach him a lesson. He wanted him to know that the entertainment industry was huge and that he, Yang Shouqing, was a man of his word. Don't think that you can look down on others just because you've been in the industry for 10 years and have been hailed as a heavenly king idol. Even the higher-ups of Huanyu had to give him face. Gu Xingze did not know the immensity of heaven and earth and dared to go against him. However, he didn't expect that Gu Xingze wasn't a simple character. The Gu family of the underworld was the only wealthy family in Beijing that had been passed down for hundreds of years. Chapter 363. It could be said that the Gu family was perhaps the only family that could rival the Mu family. How big was the Gu family's territory? No one knew. Although they had used some means to whitewash their family's reputation, they were still the underworld in their bones. Whether it was their methods or their style, they were all ruthless, especially Gu Jinglian. He was an extremely dangerous and terrifying person. When Gu Jinglian became the head of the Gu family, he was only 23 years old. However, as soon as he gained power, he immediately revealed his ambitious and ruthless side. On the second day of his ascension, he eliminated all the hall masters and retainers who were disloyal to him. His methods were so ruthless that it made people tremble in fear. Compared to Gu Jinglian's methods, Yang Shouqing's level was simply not enough. As the crown prince of the underworld, Gu Jinglian's style was mysterious and unpredictable due to his identity. Very few people had seen his true face. It was rumored that those who had seen his true face no longer existed in this world. Yang Shouqing's legs could not help but tremble. How could he not be afraid? Although he had been running amok in Hong Kong for so many years, he had always maintained a sense of respect for the Gu family, a powerful underworld family. Gu Jinglian was famous for being temperamental and unpredictable. He was a truly terrifying person. Even if he was smiling, his coldness seeped right into one's bones, because you would never know if you would die in his hands in the next moment. The door was suddenly pushed open. Gu Xingze pushed the door open and walked in. Gu Jinglian looked up. Seeing him, the corners of his lips curled up slightly. "Xingze, you're here?" "Brother." Second Master Gu, Yang Shouqing's face suddenly turned pale. He rushed over and knelt down heavily in front of Gu Xingze. Under extreme fear, his thick lips cracked and trembled. Large beads of cold sweat seeped out of his forehead and rolled down. Gu Xingze kicked his hand away unhappily. "Mr. Yang, what are you doing?" "Xingze, do you want to explain to Master Gu that what happened between us was purely a misunderstanding, just a misunderstanding?" Gu Jinglian said nonchalantly. "Xingze, did you offend Mr. Yang in some way? Hurry up and apologize to him." His voice was very gentle, but when it entered her ears, it made her shudder. Gu Xingze said calmly, "Brother, I didn't." Qin Zhou said helplessly, "Young Master Gu, it's actually not a big deal. It's just a small misunderstanding. I've already explained it to Mr. Yang, but he didn't seem willing to give me face, and insisted that I hand Xingzhe over to him. That's what happened. Mr. Yang, you're in the wrong here. Gu Jinglian slowly stood up and paced around Yang Shouqing. Shaking his head, he sighed. My younger brother grew up overseas, so he doesn't know much about the rules of the underworld in Beijing. After a pause, the corners of his lips curled up slightly. Then he said calmly, according to the rules, as his brother, I'm also half a guardian. If he has offended you in any way, you can look for me directly. I'll apologize to you on his behalf. But do you think you can take away a member of the Gu family just because you want to? If you take my woman away, how will I, Gu Jinglian, be able to show my face? What will happen to the Gu family's prestige? Chapter 364. Young Master Gu, I didn't know who he was at first. Yang Shouqing wiped the sweat off his forehead with his sleeve and said with an ugly expression, You didn't know? That can't be. Gu Jinglian leaned elegantly in front of the billiard table. He played with a poker in his hand and said faintly, I think you clearly don't care about me. Gu Jinglian. Yang Shouqing's expression changed. He immediately turned pale with fright and said, Young Master Gu, you've wronged me. I didn't know that Gu Xingzhe was the second young master of the Gu family. Gu Jinglian's lips curled into a smile, but his voice was extremely cold. He said, Yang Shouqing, I don't care about how glorious you were in Hong Kong in the past. But since you have one foot in the capital, you should know whose territory the capital is. I know. I always knew. You knew? You knew, but you still dared to mark my territory. Gu Jinglian's gaze swept over. His shiny leather shoes heavily stepped on Yang Shouqing's hand. He said fiercely, Do you know whose name is engraved on the capital's territory? Who do you think you are? You're in the Gu family's territory, and you don't know how to follow the rules. Do you think I will tolerate you? Yang Shouqing was in so much pain that his face turned pale. In a moment of confusion, he suddenly realized what Gu Jinglian was referring to. His face turned pale for a moment. I wouldn't dare. Young Master Gu, you've misunderstood. I definitely didn't mean that. Please don't lower yourself to my level. Yang Shouqing nervously grabbed Gu Jinglian's trousers and begged for mercy, but he didn't know that his so-called goodwill had violated Gu Jinglian's taboo. TSK. Gu Jinglian's thin lips curled slightly and his eyebrows furrowed in disgust. Look, you've dirted my trousers. What should I do? After saying that, he suddenly stretched out his leg and kicked him away. Yang Shouqing rolled a few times in a sorry state before he slumped against the corner of the table. His nose was bruised and his face was swollen. He was in so much pain that he sucked in a breath of cold air. His eyes couldn't even move. He saw his well-trained subordinates walking over expressionlessly. An incomparably mournful scream was heard. Blood flowed like a river in the private room. Yang Shouqing cradled his broken arm, his entire face red from the extreme pain. He kept wailing and rolling on the ground in a sorry state. Gu Jinglian glanced at him coldly and turned to leave the room. Qin Zhou and Ji Lin followed suit. Before Gu Xingzhe left, he walked up to him and grabbed his neck, warning him coldly, I'm warning you, don't even think about touching her. The she he was referring to was none other than Yun Shirshir. However, Yang Shouqing was in a daze from the pain and could only nod his head randomly. Gu Xingzhe felt relieved and left. When he walked out of the room, he took out his phone and saw Yun Shirshir's message. It was getting late, and she should be going back. Asterisk, asterisk, the car drove all the way back to the villa. Yun Shirshir looked out of the car window, and her gaze suddenly froze. At the main entrance of the villa, there was a landscape stone carved from a huge rock of the origin mountain. The words Yunshan Shi Yi were carved on it. Yunshan Shi Yi was the name of the villa. Chapter 365. Yun Shan Shur, E. What do you think of this name? Yun Shan Shur, E. Yun Shur Shur. There was no need to explain the meaning behind it. She followed the man out of the car, but he pulled her into his embrace with his arm. Her head bumped into his chest. She furrowed her brows in pain, but when she looked up, she saw him smiling teasingly with a hint of playfulness in his eyes. Didn't you want to send me home? Yun Shur fumed. Why are we here? I missed you. Accompany me tonight. The man felt a little smug. If Yun Tianyu knew that the boring summer camp at the kindergarten was specially arranged by a certain man, he would surely gnash his teeth in anger. Back at the villa, she began to feel restless and sat motionless on the sofa. She watched the man, who had taken a shower, leisurely walk back and forth in front of her. He was wearing a loose bathrobe and was leisurely wiping his wet hair. Unintentionally, her eyes would involuntarily wander to his slightly exposed chest. She would then turn away with a burning face. Mu Yaja walked to the wine cabinet and poured himself a glass of vodka. From the corner of his eye, he glanced coldly at the woman, who was still sitting motionlessly on the sofa. She seemed to be afraid of something, or perhaps she was hiding from something. He had been traveling the business world since he was 18 years old. He had to admit that some women were really scheming. Even those shrewd businessmen in the business world had to admit that they were inferior to them. This little woman in front of him, however, was simple and transparent. Her thoughts could be easily seen from her face. How could this little woman hide her thoughts from him? He leisurely sipped his glass of vodka, only to see her still sitting on the same spot like a cushion of needles. Her head was lowered in a daze, and he did not know what was on her mind. Hence, he asked, "Aren't you going to shower?" "Yes, I'll shower later. I'll wait for you in the room." With that, he walked into the bedroom and didn't look at her again. Yun Shur was stunned. She watched the man enter the bedroom, but did not move for a long time. After waiting for a while, she thought he should be asleep, right? Therefore, she looked around and guessed that he must be tired and asleep. Only then did she start to walk around the room. The bedroom was very big. It was connected to the living room, cloakroom, bathroom, study, and even a bar counter. Everything was available. She sat on the sofa for a while before she got up and walked into the bathroom. She took a shower with a messy heart. Before leaving the bathroom, he subconsciously tightened the knot on his bathrobe. In the end, he accidentally tied a dead knot. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. She walked into the bedroom. The small wall lamp was still lit. It was left for her. However, he seemed to have fallen asleep. He was lying on his side, and his tall body occupied 2/3 of the space. She secretly rejoiced and carefully climbed onto the bed. Her movements were light as she was afraid that she would make the slightest noise. However, before she could lie down properly, she felt the movement of his body beside her. This movement scared her so much that her heart stopped beating. While she was still in a daze, the man reached out and pulled her over. His large palm reached for the knot on her bathrobe. Mu Yaja tugged at the knot on her bathrobe. His lips curled into a devilish smile as he said playfully, "This knot is very tight." Chapter 366. Yun Shur's face instantly flushed red. The two were so close to each other that she could still feel the man's hot breath by her ear. Her body stiffened all of a sudden. "Do you think that I can't do anything to you just because you tied a dead knot?" The man leaned close to her ear, and his tone was a little provocative. She was so scared that she shut her eyes tightly, but before she could get what she wanted, with a pop, her vision darkened, and the lights went out. Behind her, Mu Yaja's deep voice came. "Go to sleep." She heard the man's mocking voice with a smile. "I'll let you off tonight." Even if they slept together and didn't do anything, Smelling the orchid fragrance in her hair, it was as if the haze in his heart had been swept away. Even though the beauty was lying in his arms, and she was such a hot little woman, with her curvaceous body pressed tightly against his chest, and her delicate skin intentionally or unintentionally rubbing against his body, he impulsively thought, why should he take pity on her and suppress himself so much? Why not strip her clothes off and barge into her to satisfy his lust? However, when he felt her tense body again, he didn't move in the end. The evil thoughts in his body that he had deliberately suppressed for a long time were already restless, clamoring nonstop. However, he had no choice but to suppress this fire and not think about it. This was the first time. In order to accommodate a woman, he had to suppress the endless desire in his body, just because he didn't want to scare her. Forget it. He would let her off today. But even so, he still had to do something to suppress that nameless fire. Hence, Mu Yaja lowered his head, pressed her down, and kissed her heavily. The tip of his tongue greedily hooked her lips, but he stopped there and hugged her tightly in his arms. Only then did he leave it at that. In the morning, when the first ray of sunlight shone through the gap between the heavy curtains, she woke up. To be precise, she didn't sleep well the entire night. The man behind her was indeed asleep, but his arm was still tightly locked in his embrace, confining her domineeringly. Such a possessive action didn't allow her to struggle at all. The distance between them was so close, and his steady breath lingered around the tip of her nose. She was a little absent-minded. Yun Shirshir carefully broke free from his restraints and slowly got off the bed. She walked into the living room and opened the curtains. Outside the window, the sun was already shining brightly. When she passed by the study, she inadvertently caught a glimpse of a huge picture frame hanging on the wall. With some curiosity, she carefully walked in. Her footsteps were light, and she actually felt a little guilty. Hanging on the wall was a family portrait. It was so exquisite that it was framed. In the photo, Mu Sheng was seated at the head of the table. Beside him were Mu Wanru, Jiang Ishan, Mu Lianqing, and the young Mu Yaja. The photo seemed to have been taken a long time ago, but because it had been carefully stored, it still looked as good as new. Yun Shirshir naturally couldn't recognize the others, but Mu Yaja could. When he was young, Mu Yaja didn't have much of a sharp and oppressive aura, but he was still unique among children his age. His handsome features, handsome brows, and cold eyes did not change much from now. He was 90% similar to Yu Yu. Bloodlines were really something incredible. Chapter 367. Just as Yun Shirshir was feeling emotional, her peripheral vision fell on a girl beside Mu Sheng. Her gaze changed slightly, and for a moment, her emotions were in turmoil. That girl's face was very familiar, as if she had seen her somewhere before. Her eyebrows, eyes, and even that pair of eyes seemed to be familiar. She felt a strong sense of déjà vu familiar, extremely familiar. However, her childhood memories were too hazy, and she could not remember much of them. According to psychology, if one's memories were too dark, one would selectively forget them and be unwilling to recall them. Too many memories of his childhood were dark and gloomy. Subconsciously, Yun Shirshir chose to seal them away and was unwilling to look back on them. Therefore, those memories were too distant, and she had already sealed them away. For a moment, she could not remember where she had seen this girl before. Feeling a little vexed, Yun Shirshir's gaze fell on the picture frame on the study table, and her eyes could not help but become as gentle as water. She picked up the small picture frame and saw Xiao Yichen standing in a dashing military uniform. His handsome face was in high spirits, and he was in high spirits. In contrast to the sickly Yun Tianyu, Xiao Yichen was full of vitality. His every movement seemed to have inherited his father's imposing and high-spirited manner. However, He also inherited Mu Yaja's cold and mature temperament, so it was inevitable that he would be difficult to get close to. This photo was taken a year ago when he was training in the special training camp. The uniform was tailor-made, and it was very fitting. Xiao Yichen's physique was very strong. His shoulders were broad, and his waist was narrow. He had the perfect golden ratio. Despite his young age, he looked very dashing in the military uniform. Yun Shishir picked up the picture frame and looked at Xiao Yichen's face, which seemed to be carved from the same mold as Yu's. Her fingertips slowly caressed the pair of eyebrows in the picture, and her heart ached a little. The two little fellows were so alike. Yun Shishir pursed her lips. She used to miss this child all the time. Blood was connected to the heart, and blood was thicker than water. It was not something that could be cut off by distance. The day after tomorrow was the 1st of June. Children's Day was also the birthday of these two little guys. It was as if he was personally giving the little fellow a gift. Yun Shishir thought longingly in her heart. Immersed in her thoughts, she did not notice the footsteps behind her. It was not until a pair of arms wrapped around her body that she suddenly came back to her senses. Turning her head, she saw Mu Yaja's Jun Yen, who had just woken up. The man's chin gently rested on her shoulder. As he had just woken up not long ago, his body was not as fierce as before, and his eyes were not as sharp. Instead, there was a kind of exhaustion and decadence. His messy hair slightly covered his eyelids, but it unexpectedly made him look unreasonably sexy. This man was so stylish even when he was dispirited. No wonder so many women flocked to him. What are you looking at? Oh, photos. Mu Yaja took the photo from her hand and glanced at it. This was taken last year. Huh. The little fellow is much taller than last year. How tall is he now? Yun Shishir asked eagerly. She was eager to fill in more information about Xiao Yichen. 140 centimeters. That tall. Yun Shishir was a little surprised. He's much taller than Yu. Chapter 368. Mu Yaja lowered his head to look at her. With a smile he asked, how tall is Yu? About 120 centimeters. Like this. Yun Shishir made a rough comparison. His height was around her waist. This was the result of a physical examination at the kindergarten a month ago. Yun Tianyo's height was considered taller than other children his age. The average height of a boy his age was around 110 centimeters. However, in a way, Yu's growth could not keep up with his age. Mu Yaja was nearly 9 meters tall, while she was 69 meters tall. However, for some reason, Yun Tianyo's growth seemed to be slower than other children of the same age. Compared to Xiao Yichen, however, the difference in height was obvious. Does he take calcium tablets? Yes, he takes them every day, but his growth can't keep up. The mention of Yu's health was undoubtedly a sore point for her. I asked the doctor about it. It might have something to do with him being born prematurely. Most premature babies have stunted growth. When he was born, his body was very weak. Initially, the doctor said that the child's condition was terrible. His heart was congenitally deficient, and his spleen and stomach were not functioning well. He even said that he would not live past the age of 3. At that time, I was on tenterhooks every day, afraid that I couldn't save him. Mu Yaja's handsome brows furrowed slightly. He did not know that Yun Tianyo's health was so bad. He only knew that the child was almost lost. He thought that this woman had hidden the child for her own selfish reasons and used a groundless excuse to cover up her crime. He even thought that the child would be as healthy as Xiao Yichen. Later, when they met at the hospital and learned from the doctor that his health was not good, he was surprised and stunned. But more than that, he felt sorry for him. Until now, When he learned from Yun Shirshir that the child had suffered from so many illnesses since birth, his heart ached so much that it almost suffocated him. Although Yun Shirshir spoke of it casually, no one knew how much effort she had put in to protect Yun Tianyu during the most torturous days back then. She had exhausted herself mentally and physically in exchange for Yun Tianyu's rebirth time and time again. Yun Shirshir said helplessly, "Maybe it's because he developed late." Mu Yaja looked at her side profile solemnly and did not speak. Yun Shirshir suddenly turned around and asked, "Oh, right. The day after tomorrow is the two children's birthdays. Have you prepared any gifts?" "Gifts?" Mu Yaja raised his handsome brows and shook his head. No. Yun Shirshir was taken aback. "Aren't you going to give a child a present on his birthday?" Mu Yaja said, "I have gifts. Basically, whatever he likes, and I'll get someone to buy it." Needless to say, his love for Xiao Yichen was unparalleled. However, as a father, his way of expressing his love was ultimately not that meticulous. It was a little crude. Yun Shirshir could not help rebuking him. "You should prepare a gift in advance. That way, the child will have a surprise for his birthday." "Surprise? Children like surprises?" Mu Yaja fell silent. He did not know how to create a surprise. If the child liked it, he would prepare it and buy it. Coaxing a child was probably similar to coaxing a woman. Chapter 369. Yun Shirshir seemed to have seen through his thoughts. She said helplessly, "A child's favorite moment on their birthday is probably opening their presents. Nothing can replace that kind of anticipation. I don't know what to prepare. Are you free this afternoon?" "Yes." Yun Shirshir hesitated for a moment before she suggested, "Are you willing to accompany me to the mall? Coincidentally, I also want to prepare a birthday present for you." Mu Yaja nodded without hesitation. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but feel a little excited. She clearly knew that this man was usually very busy. After all, he was in charge of a huge financial group. He must have a lot of work to do. However, when she heard that he was willing to accompany her to the mall, she was a little surprised and pleasantly surprised. She didn't know why, but her mood suddenly improved. Even the weather outside the window became sunny. It was a good day. However, when Yun Shirshir finished washing up and walked out of the bathroom, she saw that the man had changed into casual clothes and was sitting on the sofa. She walked over and was about to speak when she saw that there was something wrong with his expression. His whole body sank into the sofa, his head was lowered, and his breathing was a little heavy. She was stunned. He looked like he was in pain. His hands were gripping the armrest of the sofa tightly, and his fingers were hideous. Yun Shirshir leaned over slightly and saw that his forehead was covered in large beads of cold sweat. His handsome face was pale, and it looked a little scary. What's wrong with you?" "My stomach hurts," Mu Yaja said in a low voice. His voice sounded a little heavy. Yun Shirshir suddenly recalled that Mu Yaja's expression was a little strange from the beginning. When he hugged her from behind, she could clearly feel his stiff movements and heavy body. At first, she didn't think too much about it. What she didn't know was that Mu Yaja had a very serious stomach problem. This stomach problem originated from more than 10 years ago. When he was young, Jiang Yishan passed away from illness. It was a huge blow to him, and his willpower collapsed very quickly. He locked himself in his room, refusing to eat or drink. That period of time was gloomy and heavy, almost without any light. His mother was a very important part of his life, and the separation of life and death was almost unbearable for him. Therefore, after a month of continuous physical torture, his body quickly became thin and he suffered from physiological anorexia. Although his anorexia was cured later, it left behind a very serious illness. If he didn't eat 3 meals a day on time, it would flare up. When the stomach disease acted up, it would be extremely painful. No matter how strong one's willpower was, it would still be difficult for them to endure it. Thus, they would always have stomach medicine at home. Mu Yaja lifted his heavy eyelids and pointed at the cabinet. Medicine. Only then did Yun Shirshir realize that he was suffering from gastric problems. You also had mild gastric problems. When he was suffering from gastric problems, he was also in pain. It was heartbreaking. Following the direction he pointed, Yun Shirshir rummaged through the cabinets and finally found a medicine box. She opened it. Other than the simple medicine for wounds, most of it was gastric tranquilizers. She referred to the dosage of the medicine and took 2 tablets. She held a glass of water and handed it to him. Mu Yaja reached out to take it, but there was a sharp pain in his stomach. He didn't hold the glass firmly. With a bang, the glass fell to the ground. Water splashed everywhere, and the splashing glass cut Yun Shirshir's arm. Chapter 370. Seeing him fall over, Yun Shirshir did not notice the bleeding wound at all. She hurriedly squatted by the sofa and held his face. Mu Yaja, get up, sit up. I'll feed you the medicine. There was no response. It was as if he was in so much pain that his consciousness was blurry. Yun Shirshir hugged his shoulders again and tried to help him sit up, but his body was too heavy and she could not exert any strength. Yun Shirshir looked at the pill in her hand in annoyance, then lowered her head to look at the man's handsome face that was twisted in pain. She did not care so much and rushed in to pour a glass of pure water. She walked to the sofa and stuffed a pillow under his head for him to rest on. She held the back of his neck and put the medicine in the water until it dissolved completely. She cupped his face and parted his thin lips. She drank a mouthful of water and carefully passed the water into his mouth. Mu Yaja's throat moved and he swallowed the water. Yun Shirshir then passed the medicine into his mouth in one go. After a while, the man regained some consciousness. He opened his eyes slightly and vaguely saw Yun Shirshir's nervous face. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Can you sit up? Yun Shirshir saw that his face was pale, and she was worried for a moment. Usually, in her impression, this man was always high and mighty, like a king who could summon the wind and rain. He was as powerful as a god. However, she did not expect him to be so weak now that he had gastric problems. He was not angry at all. When she thought of this, she could not help but laugh at her ignorance. No matter how powerful this man was, he was still a person like her. He was not a god. People would eventually fall sick. Illness came like a landslide. No matter how strong a person's body was, there would be times when they fell sick. Was it because he did not eat breakfast when he woke up? She did not know why, but she was blaming herself. Thus, she hurriedly said, "Lie down for a while. I'll make breakfast for you." She had just gotten up when the man suddenly grabbed her arm. With a tug, Yun Shirshir lost her balance and fell into his arms. "What are you doing?" She was a little angry, a little anxious, and a little worried. She was afraid that she would fall so heavily and crush him. Mu Yaja held her neck with one hand, and his other hand slowly caressed her lips. There was a trace of dark sharpness in his eyes. "Where are you going?" "I'm making breakfast for you. You have gastric problems. It must be because you don't eat 3 meals regularly." Yun Shirshir replied. She wanted to get up again, but the man held her in his arms. But this time, his arm was firmly locked onto her waist, not giving her any chance to escape. What are you doing?" she asked in annoyance. She frowned and was slightly annoyed. Her tone was coquettish, and her eyes revealed helplessness and embarrassment. Mu Yaja lowered his head and looked at her. He could see the angry expression on her face. Seeing him staring at her with a deep gaze, Yun Shirshir was a little stunned. She pursed her red lips and bit her lip gently, looking a little uneasy. However, such a small action in his eyes had an inexplicable charm and shyness. It was even seductive. The way she bit her lip was so cute that his body, which was originally tense because of his illness, started to heat up. Chapter 371. Thus, he said, "I'm not eating breakfast. I want to eat you." When Yun Shirshir heard this, her face stiffened, and she said dejectedly, "Hey, I really lost to you. Your stomach is acting up. Why are you still so restless?" "Not only is my stomach acting up, my lovesickness is also acting up, don't you know?" How long had it been since he had touched this woman? He couldn't remember the number of times. He only knew that his body was constantly clamoring, wanting to possess her, penetrate her, and even wanted to integrate her into his bones and blood. How long had it been since he had tasted that feeling? He missed it so much. He missed it so much that even though his stomach was acting up, the desire in his body was constantly stirring. He was like a youthful and ignorant youth who had tasted the forbidden fruit for the first time, wanting more. Yun Shirshir was a little annoyed as she rebuked, "Muyaja, are you a scoundrel? Your body is already like this, and you still—" Halfway through her words, she couldn't continue no matter what and only felt ashamed. Her tender and white face was stained with a blush of shyness. She lowered her eyes and wished she could dig a hole in the ground right now to bury her burning face. She might as well just bury it. Muyaja saw the shyness on her face and felt that it was a little interesting, but also a little funny. He boasted that he wasn't a man whose lower body was swayed by his emotions. He was different from those second-generation hedonistic sons who liked to play with women. When it came to women, he had always had self-control and even had misophobia. But this woman was simply a charming and fragrant evil concubine. What she had was the ability to make men obsessed with her. Even if it was in ancient times, no matter how wise the king was, he would probably be like King Yu of Zhou for Bao Si. In order to win a beauty's smile, he would use the beacon fire to play with the feudal lords. He wrapped his arms around her neck and brought her face closer. A pair of handsome eyes slowly swept over her face for a long time, allowing his face to be immersed in her hair and scrupulously smelling the freshness and charm of her hair. At the same time, because of this suppression, his body was tense to the point that it was almost painful. The man slowly opened his sharp eyes and met that jade-like face again. Suddenly, he asked coldly, "Do you think that having sex with me is a shameful thing?" Her face was slightly hot, but she didn't make a sound, as if she didn't agree or disagree. The man smiled and said faintly, "Woman, do you know, scientists say that an adult's normal routine should be 3 to 4 times a week." Yun Shirshir saw him suddenly speaking, and she was a little unable to react. Then, the man asked further, "Think about it. How long has it been since I touched you? Don't tell me, normal needs?" Yun Shirshir was inexplicably at a loss for words. He said it so righteously, and she couldn't refute him. But she felt that there was something wrong with his logic. Muyaja played with a strand of her hair, twirling it around his finger and playing with it. His breath was like orchids. "I only have you as my woman. I have my needs. If you don't let me touch you, who else should I touch? Moreover, you're a woman and I'm a man. Is this kind of love between a man and a woman shameful in your eyes?" Yun Shirshir thought for a moment and suddenly said with a red face, "You obviously have a fiancé?" The man's handsome face raised a trace of inexplicable meaning. His eyes were like torches, as his long and narrow eyes narrowed slightly with a hint of deep meaning. So, this was what she cared about. Chapter 372. Jealous that he had a woman in name, but not in reality by his side. Yun Shirshir felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by him and wanted to brush it off. Let's not talk about it anymore. Does your stomach still hurt? Are you jealous? No. You clearly are. If you're jealous, then let me tell you, you don't have to think too much. Muyaja hugged her waist and pulled her towards him. He turned his body slightly and pressed her under his body. He pinched her chin and covered her lips with his. He sealed her lips with a gentle kiss. After a simple and charming kiss, he looked at her and smiled. You only need to know that my body wants you. I don't have any feelings for other women. As he spoke, he grabbed her hand that she didn't know how to move and guided it downwards until her fingertips touched that mysterious territory. Through the material of his clothes, she could vaguely feel that arrogant posture. Thus, her face became even hotter, as if blood was about to drip out. What about you? Don't you want me? The man was so gentle beside her ear that his warm breath curled around her earlobe, burning her ears and neck. This woman's body seemed to be extremely sensitive. Even a gentle touch would make her blush, not to mention his advances. Her entire body was burning. You, Yun Shirshir said angrily. That's enough. Muyaja didn't give her a chance to refute and blocked her mouth with a sentence. I only want you. I don't have any feelings for other women. Yun Shirshir blushed at his words again. Muyaja played with her lips gently, his fingertips caressing those cherry lips that made one drool, but he said word by word, As for the status, I'll give it to you, but now is not the time. Muyaja, is this considered a courtship? Yun Shirshir asked all of a sudden. The man's face froze. But your stomach is acting up. If you don't know how to control yourself, you'll suffer when the time comes. Yun Shirshir lectured him seriously. Her words were a prophecy or a curse. Just as she finished speaking, his stomach, which was already feeling better, experienced another day of cramping pain. Was this woman a curse master? This stomach pain, speak of the devil. Did she have to spoil the fun like this? A certain man felt very sullen. In order to eat this woman, since she didn't like his forceful methods, he had to persuade her with reason and emotions. Just as he was about to eat her, the stomach pain came again. Damn it, if your stomach hurts, then have a good rest. Yun Shirshir threw him on the sofa. As she pushed open the door to leave, she said, Be good and wait for me. I'll cook noodles for you. Muyaja could only stare at her back view as she left. Seeing the fragrant meat in his mouth fly away, he didn't have any other thoughts. Yun Shirshir closed the door and held her heart with both hands. Her heart was thumping. Status, I'll give it to you. The man's firm words kept echoing in her ears. She didn't dare to let her imagination run wild. She took a deep breath and quickly went to cook noodles for the man. Chapter 373. The noodles were specially cooked so that they would break in the mouth and be easily digested. When she presented the noodles to the man, Muyaja's unsatisfied and cold face, coupled with the hot noodles, seemed to be a sharp contrast. Unsatisfied. How unsatisfied was he? I don't want to eat noodles, I want to eat. Shut up and eat the noodles, Yun Shirshir said with a red face. Is it wrong for me to want to eat meat? Muyaja took the bowl and said that deliberately. His expression looked innocent, but there was a hint of teasing in his eyes. He was skirting the boundaries, which was considered flirting. Although he couldn't touch her physically, he could still flirt verbally. Thus, Muyaja's mood improved a little as he enjoyed her embarrassed face. Then, he finished the entire bowl of noodles, not leaving a single bit behind. When he finished the whole bowl of noodles, the stomachache seemed to have dissipated by a lot. The car drove slowly into the shopping center. Muyaja dropped Yun Shirshir at the entrance and parked the car. Yun Shirshir looked up and sized up the magnificent entrance of the shopping center. Such a huge building stood in the most expensive area in the city center. It was like a piece of treasure land where every inch was worth gold and silver. The entrance was luxurious and grand. Even the security guard standing at the entrance seemed to have the words, "Poor people and dogs are not allowed," written on his face. She said that she wanted to buy a gift, so he drove the car here. He heard that the expenses here were very high. No one dared to step in if their monthly income was less than 100,000 yuan. Yun Shishir didn't think much and walked in. The first floor was mostly for cosmetics and some luxury jewelry brands. Mu Yaja asked her to wait for him on the first floor, so she wasn't in a hurry to go up to the second floor. Instead, she browsed through the jewelry counters. She wasn't buying, she was just looking. While she was strolling, she suddenly heard a strange yet familiar voice. Shishir? Yun Shishir was a little surprised. She looked up and saw that the person walking towards her was her work colleague, Han Xiaoxiao. This Han Xiaoxiao was considered a flower in the office. Not only did she have a hot body, but her facial features were also very beautiful. Before Yun Shishir's arrival, she had always been like a fish in water in the office. After all, most of the employees in that company were men, and single women were few and far between. Hence, as one of the better-looking single women, Han Xiaoxiao was naturally in high demand and was considered to be the one who could summon the wind and rain. But after Yun Shishir entered that company, everything changed. Yun Shishir was gentle and easy to get along with. Not only was she kind and charitable, but she was also different from Han Xiaoxiao in that she would often help her female colleagues. Hence, Yun Shishir completely stole her limelight. Han Xiaoxiao was extremely jealous of Yun Shishir. Therefore, she often ostracized her. Now that Yun Shishir left the department, Han Xiaoxiao returned to the throne of a princess. There were still many people in the company who surrounded her. A while ago, she developed a private relationship with her superior. She hooked up with such a person. So naturally, she was promoted to the deputy manager of the public relations department. It was the time when she was in the limelight. As a result, Han Xiaoxiao could be said to be very different from the past. She was much more liberal with her spending and often went to some high-end consumer places. Chapter 374. If it wasn't for her good looks, it would be degrading for her to wear cheap clothes all day long. What made her even more jealous, though, was that she did not know what ability Yun Shishir had to be able to make those cheap clothes look fashionable. Could it be that with a good face, one could look classy in any clothes? Shishir, long time no see. It's such a coincidence to meet you here. Han Xiaoxiao swayed her hips as she walked forward. Her movements were flirtatious. I haven't heard much about you recently. Did you find another job after leaving the company? Yun Shishir did not have a good impression of her. Not only did she ostracize her, but this woman's behavior in the company was no different from a green tea girl. Therefore, her attitude was not very enthusiastic. I found one. Seeing that she was so cold, Han Xiaoxiao did not get angry. Instead, she leaned closer to her. In the past, Yun Shishir was always praised as a goddess in the company. However, it was different now. She had hooked up with a big shot. Her status and identity were not what it used to be. Therefore, she wanted to use this rare encounter to show off and show off. Why are you so cold? Are you in a bad mood? Why don't I treat you to a cup of coffee? It's at Blue Mountain Coffee on the 3rd floor. Blue Mountain Coffee was not cheap. It's okay. I'm waiting for someone, Yun Shishir said calmly as she browsed casually at Tiffany's counter. Han Xiaoxiao saw that she was looking at jewelry and stuck close to her like a piece of plaster. She smiled and said, "Tiffany's jewelry is a world-class designer in America. It's not cheap. I just bought one yesterday. It's a little expensive, but everyone said it looked good when they wore it. Yun Shirshir only lowered her head to look at it casually and ignored her. This woman was so talkative. She was annoyed with her. If it wasn't because she was waiting for someone, she would have gone upstairs to get rid of her. When the salesperson at the Tiffany's counter saw that Yun Shirshir was only looking at her without saying a word, she could not help but size her up. She noticed that she was wearing unbranded clothes and looked very poor just by looking at her. Therefore, he thought that this woman must not have much purchasing power. On the contrary, the woman standing next to her was dressed fashionably in branded clothes. She looked rich and respectable. The salesperson took a closer look and saw Han Xiaoxiao standing in front of the counter. Her hand was intentionally or unintentionally fiddling with a necklace on her neck. She was slightly shocked and said in astonishment, "Wow, beautiful lady, is the necklace you're wearing on your neck the Bulgari series?" Han Xiaoxiao's lips curled up. "I bought this necklace a while ago. I don't really like it, and it's very cheap. It's only 20,000 yuan for one. It makes you look especially elegant. However, I have a series that should be more suitable for you." Han Xiaoxiao pretended to be a rich lady and said, "Take it out for me to see." The two of them echoed each other and started chatting passionately. Yun Shirshir was looking at the price signs. She was speechless when she saw the long string of zeros on the price signs. Then she saw Han Xiaoxiao chatting with the salesperson. It was obvious that Han Xiaoxiao wanted to show off in front of her. She was a little dispirited and wanted to leave. Mu Yaja parked his car and went up to the first floor. He saw that she was standing at the jewelry counter and seemed to have nothing to do. He walked over slowly. "Have you waited long?" Chapter 375. His appearance had attracted Han Xiaoxiao's attention. The handsome man in front of her was tall and slender, especially that exquisite handsome face of his. His every movement exuded a natural aristocratic aura that made her fall in love with him. Who was this man? He looked like he was either rich or respectable. Why was he with Yun Shirshir? Han Xiaoxiao's eyesight was outstanding after all. She could tell the brand value of Mu Yaja from head to toe at a glance. Compared to Yun Shirshir, who was wearing cheap clothes, it was a little out of place. "Shirshir, who is he?" Yun Shirshir pursed her lips and did not want to bother with her. Mu Yaja looked at Han Xiaoxiao coldly and lowered his head to ask, "You guys know each other?" "Ex-colleague. We are friends." The two of them spoke at the same time, but gave different answers. Han Xiaoxiao's face revealed an awkward smile. "Shirshir, why don't you introduce him?" "Her man." Without waiting for Yun Shirshir to speak, Mu Yaja said concisely. Han Xiaoxiao was stunned. Even Yun Shirshir's expression froze. "What are you talking about? Isn't that the case?" Han Xiaoxiao bit her red lips hard. She was a little indignant and felt that she had been outdone. At the same time, she felt that the man in front of her was a little unreal. How could he be Yun Shirshir's man? Didn't he take a look at his background? Was she even worthy? Rich families were particular about matching in social status. How could a commoner like Yun Shirshir be related to a rich family? The more she thought about it, the angrier she felt. She had wanted to show off in front of her, but in the end, she felt like she had been checkmated. This knowledge made her extremely displeased. Mu Yaja's palm gently covered her head and stroked it gently. "What do you like? I'll buy it for you." "I don't like it," Yun Shirshir said indifferently, but her gaze landed on the display cabinet. There was a pair of exquisite and beautiful earrings in the shape of a 5-petaled flower, just like stars in the sky. The name was interesting as well. This was called Stars in the Sky, but it was expensive to make. Mu Yaja followed her gaze, and saw the pair of earrings as well. His slender fingers clasped the cabinet's surface. "This pair, take it out." Yun Shirshir was a little surprised and opened her mouth. She did not understand the meaning of his actions. The salesperson glanced at Yun Shirshir, still feeling incredulous. She would not be willing to let ordinary people. This was especially true for someone like Yun Shirshir, who was dressed shabbily. She would not be able to afford it. Anyway, but Muyaja was different. One look, and she could tell that he was of noble birth. Muyaja glanced at the salesperson's gaze and knew what she was thinking. However, he did not show it until the salesperson presented the pair of stars in the sky in front of Muyaja. Muyaja reached out and took one of them. He reached out and gently brushed away her hair. In an instant, that small and cute earring was exposed to the air. Muyaja gently put the earring on for her. The star-like earring set off the pure white earring. It looked even more tender and beautiful. It was as if it was silently tempting him to kiss her. Chapter 376. He lowered his head slightly, and his thin lips that were cold from the night breeze kissed her earlobe. Han Xiaoxiao was stunned, but the kissing scene in front of her was too beautiful. Even she couldn't come back to her senses for a while. Yun Shirshir was shocked. Her body moved slightly to the side, and she glared at him with embarrassment. She was obviously shy. Do you like it?" Muyaja pushed her in front of the mirror and lifted her hair. Yun Shirshir looked at the mirror. Although she didn't say anything, her eyes revealed her love for the pair of earrings. Muyaja put the other one on her. The salesperson immediately praised, "This lady looks really good wearing this pair of earrings." "Sir, do you want this pair of earrings?" "Yes." While speaking, Muyaja's eyes didn't leave Yun Shirshir at all. He just handed over a black gold credit card. The salesperson was still puzzled. Why didn't this man ask about the price of this pair of earrings? He just gave the card to her directly. Was he so rich? However, when she took the credit card from him and looked at it, she didn't have any doubts. Ultima, the king of the cards. People who had a black gold credit card had a supreme status. In the big capital, there were only 5 such cards. Even Han Xiaoxiao couldn't help but be shocked. He was stunned. He was really stunned. One had to know that a black gold credit card wasn't something that ordinary rich people could have. Who was this man? After swiping the card and paying the bill, the salesperson handed the gift box to Muyaja. The man hugged Yun Shirshir and left, looking at the 2 leaving figures. Han Xiaoxiao wanted to chase after them. Shirshir, the latter, however, ignored her completely. Han Xiaoxiao was extremely embarrassed. She turned back to the counter and asked the salesperson, "Is that man's card the legendary black gold credit card?" The salesperson's lips twitched, but she said, "I'm sorry, madam. This involves the customer's privacy. Forgive me for not being able to tell you. How much is the earring that the man just bought? I want it too." Han Xiaoxiao pretended to be generous, as if she was eager to regain her face. "That earring is the only one in the counter at the moment. It's already gone, but I can tell you the price. It's 990,000. 990,000. A pair of earrings cost 990,000. Han Xiaoxiao's expression stiffened. The toy section was on the 5th floor, but when they reached the 3rd floor, Muyaja held her in his arms and walked towards the women's clothing section. When they arrived at the Chanel counter, Muyaja picked out a few dresses for her. Yun Shirshir. Muyaja gracefully sat down on the sofa. "Take it." Yun Shirshir said, "What do you mean by that?" "To buy clothes for you." Yun Shirshir furrowed her brows and said, "I don't want it." Muyaja didn't allow her to object. He snapped his fingers, and a few salespeople surrounded Yun Shirshir and escorted her into the fitting room. He smiled evilly, throwing a tantrum in front of him. Didn't she know whose territory this shopping mall was? Yun Shirshir's protest came from the fitting room. All of you get out. Aya, don't take off my clothes. I'll do it myself. Can I do it myself? All of you get out. The salespeople were all chased out. Chapter 377. Mu Yaja glanced at it and felt satisfied. He lowered his head and flipped through the magazine again. Go and change into another one. Yun Shirshir changed into a few more outfits. Mu Yaja frowned. He suddenly realized something. Damn it, this woman looked good in everything. Thus, he stood up and walked to the counter. This one, this one, this one, and that one. Which one? I want that one too. Pack it up. Yes, sir. Yun Shirshir was speechless. Why did he buy clothes as if he was shopping at a wholesale market? Just like that, Yun Shirshir finally went up to the toy counter on the 4th floor with bags of various sizes. She had specially chosen a famous toy brand. When she walked out, she handed a beautifully wrapped gift to Muyaja. This is a gift for the child. She had specially prepared this gift for Xiaoi Chen. Muyaja took the gift. She had personally wrapped it and written a birthday card with her heart. Her handwriting was beautiful, and at the end of the card, there was a smiley face. It was very heartwarming. This should be a birthday surprise. After shopping, it was naturally time to fill his stomach. Yun Shirshir chose a restaurant, but it was crowded. The waiter apologetically said that there were only seats available in the lobby. Mu Yaja made a call, and shortly after, the lobby manager hurried over. Knowing that the CEO of Dishing Financial Group had arrived, the manager of the restaurant personally led a group of people to greet him warmly and respectfully. Then, he caught a glimpse of the innocent girl beside him and was stunned. The manager looked at Yun Shirshir with a smile and asked politely, "May I know how I should address you, miss?" Yun Shirshir smiled, but was pulled into Mu Yaja's arms. This was a silent announcement of her identity. Since she was CEO Mu's woman, he naturally had to serve her well, right? You can mess with anyone, but you can't mess with women, especially this important person's woman. Mu Yaja saw the look in his eyes and knew what he was thinking. However, he was too lazy to point it out. He only ordered coldly, "Prepare a table of food." The manager nodded hurriedly. "Yes, sir. I'll get someone to prepare it right away." The manager had specially arranged a room with an elegant environment for them. The elegant lighting, the glass windows, and the beaded curtains gave the room a classical charm. How could he dare to neglect someone of Mu Yaja's status? Moreover, it was an honor for CEO Mu to grace his restaurant with his presence. In fact, this private room had been reserved by a guest at a high price earlier, and it was also scheduled for this time in the evening. Weren't they bumping into each other? However, he had no choice but to reject it. Over the phone, the manager repeatedly reminded Mu Yaja that he did not like noisy environments and insisted on a private room with a quiet environment. Even the most distinguished customer couldn't compare to this one. Even if he offended the other customers, the store manager had no choice but to push it away. Yun Shirshir was so hungry that her head was dizzy. She felt lightheaded when she walked, and her stomach was empty. When she saw Mu Yaja walking far ahead, not caring about the bags she was carrying, she was full of resentment. However, when she sat down at the table and stared dumbfoundedly at the delicacies on the table that were comparable to the Manchu Han imperial feast, her gloomy mood was swept away in an instant. Chapter 378. Just like that, the two of them occupied a big round table with a sumptuous spread of delicacies. Extravagant and corrupt, but at this moment, Yun Shirshir was very willing to be corrupt. Oh my God! She was so happy, but there was so much food. Could the two of them finish it? Wouldn't it be a waste if they couldn't finish it? Hence, she decided that she could just take it away like the last time. Yun Shirshir was so tempted by the aroma that she was drooling. She raised her chopsticks and planned to gorge herself. However, in the blink of an eye, she saw Muyaja sitting at the table calmly. He didn't seem to be interested in the sumptuous spread on the table. He didn't even look at it, and was casually wiping his hands with a wet towel. Master Muyaja was extremely picky in this aspect. He had been pampered since young and lived a life of luxury. Naturally, he didn't care about these. If it wasn't for her, in his eyes, these sumptuous delicacies weren't even as good as the noodles she cooked. Yun Shirshir stared at his elegant dining manners. She thought that he was from an upper-class family after all, so his etiquette was good. He also had a serious obsession with cleanliness. Yun Shirshir despised him in her heart. She didn't care about him. She picked up a piece of beef and stuffed it into her mouth. Her mouth was full, and she was bursting with happiness. It was delicious. She was so happy that she cried. She had never eaten anything so delicious in her life except for Yuyu's cooking. At this moment, there was a sudden sound of footsteps outside the door. Yun Shirshir turned her head with some doubts. She vaguely heard a woman's dissatisfied and coquettish voice. I had already booked the private room earlier. How could you cancel it just like that? Miss Lin, don't be angry. You have an important guest. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been pushed away. Oh, she's a guest, and I'm not. What kind of boss are you? Don't you know the rules of first come, first served? You're a businessman, but you're so. All businessmen are evil. Sorry. Next time, there won't be such a thing. The manager apologized. Next time? How can there be a next time? Get out of my way. Don't. Miss Lin, please wait. There's someone in the room. Humph. Don't stop me. I want to see what kind of amazing guest actually took the seat that I reserved in advance. You're quite capable. The door of the private room was suddenly pushed open. This action was too rude and caused too much of a commotion. Muyaja frowned slightly and turned around. A layer of frost appeared on his face. He saw a gorgeously dressed woman standing by the side of the room. She was wearing a long black dress and exquisite makeup. She was accompanied by an extraordinary man who also looked very noble. It was obvious that the two of them were born in a wealthy family. Their gestures had a kind of elegance that was unique to the upper class. Seeing this situation, the manager stood at the side uneasily. He was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. He looked at Muyaja with a smile on his face and secretly looked at the woman beside him from time to time. For a moment, he didn't know how to ease the situation. That woman first looked at Yun Shirshir with a sharp gaze. She opened her mouth with a gloomy expression and was about to flare up. However, from the corner of her eyes, she caught a glimpse of the extraordinary man on the main seat. The words that she wanted to say were suddenly stuck in her throat, and she forcefully swallowed them back down. Young Master Mu? The woman's red lips opened slightly. She was secretly surprised, and her eyes revealed an unexpected joy. Muyaja looked at her coldly. With just one look, the woman knew that he had forgotten about her. Chapter 379. The situation was a little tense. It made sense. How could the high and mighty crown prince of Dishing Financial Group remember a mere provincial governor's daughter? This woman was the daughter of the Jianghai provincial governor, Yi Minglan. She had originally booked this private room at a high price to entertain her good friend, who had just returned to the country. However, when she arrived, she was politely asked to leave the room by the manager. She had come to look for her aggressively, but she did not expect that the person who had occupied her private room would be Chairman Mu. One had to know that Mu Yaja rarely ate at such a small restaurant. Moreover, in her impression, this man was very busy every day. How could he have the time to be so carefree? Yi Minglan was overjoyed to be able to meet him here. However, after being pleasantly surprised, the woman's gaze turned to Yun Shirshir with some suspicion. Who was the little girl sitting next to him? She was dressed like a pure student and looked very well behaved. She did not look like a young lady from any family. She seemed to be a commoner. Yi Minglan was a little surprised. For someone like young Master Mu, as long as he wanted, those international supermodels, movie queens, and even upper-class socialites would all fall in love with him. However, this girl had a young face. She looked like she had just graduated from university. However, even though she boasted that she was picky, she had to admit that this young girl in front of her was unbelievably good-looking. Her skin was fair, her eyes were bright, her lips were red, and her teeth were white. Even without makeup, she was already very charming. If such a lovely girl were to be thrown into her circle, many men would fight over her. Yun Shirshir felt uncomfortable being stared at by her. She looked up and felt a burning gaze on her. She followed the gaze and saw the man beside the woman staring at her. Rather than saying that he was sizing her up, it was more accurate to say that his gaze looked as if he wanted to skin her alive. The man was tall and handsome. He was dressed casually, but he exuded an aristocratic aura. His status had always been either rich or noble. When their gazes met, Yun Shirshir subconsciously turned her face away. She was instantly disgusted by these two people who had suddenly barged in. Yi Minglan smiled brightly and asked in a sweet voice, "Master Mu, do you still remember me? My father is Yi Qiqing, and he should have some friendship with you." "Oh, right. If you don't mind, let's sit at the same table. Look, at this time, there aren't any private rooms in the restaurant that are empty." "Huh? The private room that I originally booked has also been—" She spoke very tactfully, but she did not lose her sense of propriety as she politely made a suggestion. Mu Yaja remained calm and collected. He neither nodded nor refused, as if he had tacitly agreed. Yi Minglan was a little overwhelmed by the favor. She tentatively took a step forward. Seeing that his face was still calm, her heart finally calmed down. Her eyes immediately lit up with joy as she entered the private room with the man. Mu Yaja did not have much of an impression of Yi Minglan. They were not familiar with each other and did not interact much with each other. However, her father, Yi Qiqing, was someone who had close contact with him. Based on this point, he could not reject Yi Minglan. Yun Shirshir was a little unhappy and did not want to eat at the same table as the two of them. She did not like these two people, especially that woman. Her gaze just now was as if she wanted to cut her into pieces. Chapter 380. She had to admit that she was a little upset. What made her even more upset was that he had allowed them to sit at the same table. Upset. But what could she do? She could not chase him away. She did not have the right to do so. She was just freeloading. She picked up her chopsticks, but lost her appetite. Yi Minglan sat down and smiled. "Young Master Mu, let me introduce you. This is the eldest son of the Li group, Li Qingze." Then she smiled and turned to the man beside her. "Qingze, I've mentioned this to you before. He's the famous CEO of Dishing Financial Group and a legendary figure in Beijing. Mu Yaja. We all call him Young Master Mu." As he spoke, he completely ignored Yun Shirshir at the side. Yun Shirshir was also happy to have some peace. "Young Master Mu, I've heard a lot about you." Li Qingze smiled and nodded. He stood up slightly and extended his hand politely. Mu Yaja glanced coldly at his outstretched hand, but his expression did not change. Li Qing's hand froze in midair. He could neither extend it nor retract it. Just as the atmosphere froze, Mu Yaja extended his hand indifferently and held it gently. He did not even bend his fingers. His cold and distant attitude made Li Qingze feel awkward. This man was as arrogant as a ruler. Although his status was not as high as Mu Yaja's, not many people in the capital dared to give him the cold shoulder. Most of them would respectfully smile apologetically at him. Yet this man was so cold and arrogant at their first meeting. It really made him feel embarrassed. Yi Minglan smiled to ease the atmosphere and looked at Yun Shirshir. "Ha, young Master Mu, this lady is... You don't have to know." Unexpectedly, the man's cold words stopped her enthusiasm. He did not like to tell unimportant people about his private affairs. However, his ambiguous attitude became another form of protection in Yi Minglan's eyes. Yi Minglan could not put her face down for a moment, but due to Mu Yaja's status, she could only smile apologetically and find a way out of this embarrassing situation. "This little girl is quite pretty." Although he was smiling on the outside, his heart was filled with jealousy and hatred. At least in her opinion, this girl had a high status by Mu Yaja's side. The moment Yi Minglan mentioned Yun Shirshir, the unhappiness in Li Qingze's heart immediately disappeared, and he looked at her with an ambiguous gaze. To be honest, he was quite interested in this girl. Not only did she have a stunning and elegant appearance, but she also had a pair of stubborn eyes that could invisibly arouse a man's desire to conquer her. It was said that there were two types of women that men could not refuse. One was a woman who was as pure as water, without a trace of impurity. The other was a woman who aroused a man's desire to conquer. As luck would have it, Yun Shirshir was exposed to both. Come to think of it, this Mu Yaja really didn't know what kind of ability he had. It was rumored that he didn't get close to women, but who would have thought that in private he was actually keeping such a beautiful woman in captivity? It was really enviable. At that time, the two of them had their own thoughts about Yun Shirshir. Li Qingze kind of wanted to have a taste of this girl. However, seeing that such a lovely person had already been taken, he could only watch. What kind of woman had he not had? However, they were not as attractive as this girl. Since she was Mu Yaja's woman and he couldn't touch her, there was nothing he could do. He could only hope that when young Master Mu got tired of her, he would snatch her away. Chapter 381. Li Qingze smiled at her gracefully and gently asked, "Which family's daughter is this lovely young lady from?" Yun Shirshir was stunned and did not want to bother with him. What daughter? She did not have such a noble background. Her indifference did not want to arouse his interest. Li Qingze mistakenly thought that she was shy, so he softened his voice. "How should I address you?" Yi Minglan was completely ignored. Her face was expressionless, but she scolded him in her heart. A man will be a man. Once he sees a beautiful prey, he loses his soul. How dare he covet young Master Mu's woman? Did he eat a bear's heart or a leopard's guts? Yun Shirshir shot a glance at the aloof Mu Yaja beside her and smiled mischievously. Her eyebrows curved into crescents, and her lips, stained with red wine, were tender and plump. When she smiled, she looked seductive and bewitching. "Haha, why should I tell you?" After that, she ignored him. Interesting. This girl is quite interesting. She is quite arrogant. Li Qingze was thinking about her, but Yi Minglan secretly rolled her eyes and warned him not to go overboard. She did not want to make young Master Mu unhappy. Afraid of him? Li Qingze had been spoiled since he was young and grew up in the palm of his hand. He was a typical hedonistic second generation and was used to being arrogant. Why would he put this young Master Mu in his eyes? The Mu family? They were just the descendants of a prestigious family. Now that generations had changed, and old Master Mu was old. How could this brat cover the sky with one hand? The Li family was one of the wealthiest families in the capital. Everyone in the family was not easy to deal with. Yun Shirshir did not know what he was scheming. She felt Yi Minglan's piercing and venomous gaze, and saw doubt and hatred in her eyes. She was unjustly implicated, but she could not just lie down for nothing, right? If she wanted to lie down, she might as well lie down until the end. Hence, under Yi Minglan's gaze, she used her arm to nudge Mu Yaja and said in a sweet voice, "Why don't you peel a lobster for me?" Mu Yaja had always been good at scheming in the business world. How could he not know what she was thinking? He looked at her coldly from the corner of his eyes, as if warning her not to play any tricks. He had never served anyone in his entire life. Having failed, Yun Shirshir's entire face turned a little gloomy. Why didn't this man cooperate at all? On the other hand, Yi Minglan looked satisfied. It seemed that this girl didn't know her limits. Did she think that she was young Master Mu's woman and wanted a mile after taking an inch? When had she ever seen young Master Mu serving anyone? She put down her chopsticks and lost her appetite completely. She drank the iced drink beside her in one gulp. As soon as she drank it, she felt an inexplicable swelling pain in her lower abdomen. She was still angry and didn't pay much attention to it. However, after a while, she clearly felt something strange in her lower abdomen. A warm and moist feeling caused her expression to change drastically. Even her entire body was petrified. Oh no, it couldn't be, right? Could it be that thing is coming? As she hesitated, her heart was filled with apprehension. She felt like she was sitting on a pincushion, and her entire body was stiff and motionless. However, that feeling was getting more and more obvious. Yun Shirshir's face suddenly turned hot. Just as she was about to get up and go to the bathroom to check out what was going on, she saw a small patch of red on the stool from the corner of her eye. Her face immediately turned hot, and she sat down again. Oh my God! How embarrassing! Yun Shirshir simply wanted to cry, but had no tears to shed. What was so embarrassing? Oh, and it had to be in front of this man. Moreover, there were outsiders present. Yun Shirshir simply wanted to dig a hole and hide in it. Chapter 382. Yun Shirshir couldn't bring herself to say it. He still didn't know how to solve such a difficult problem. Mu Yaja was surprised to see her face flushed red, and her eyes narrowed. Mu Yaja? She leaned into the crook of his arm, half of her body leaning on him, and begged in a low voice, "Can you let them go?" Yi Minglan was stunned. She was the first woman who dared to call Mu Yaja by his full name, and the only one. The man didn't seem to be angry. However, when Yi Minglan and Li Chengze heard the second half of the sentence, both of them were stunned. They didn't expect this girl to be so rude. What they did not expect, however, was for Mu Yaja to look at them coldly the moment they finished speaking. Although he did not say anything, his cold gaze seemed to be ordering them to leave. Yi Minglan was embarrassed. When had she ever been humiliated like this? Even so, she had to smooth things over for herself. She stood up and said to Mu Yaja, "Young Master Mu, I just remembered that I have something to do with Li Chengze now. I won't disturb you anymore." As she spoke, she glared at Yun Shirshir. Seeing that Li Chengze was still in a daze, she pushed him and said, "Chengze, let's go." Li Chengze came back to his senses and stood up to leave with her. When the two of them walked out, Li Chengze's face was full of bad luck. When had he ever been humiliated like this? However, even though he was indignant, he still couldn't forget Yun Shirshir. "You're still thinking about her? I say, you're really bold." How dare you think about young Master Moo's woman? If young Master Moo finds out about this, you'll have to bear the consequences. You're praising her so highly. I just can't stand it. Is the He family that great? Li Qingze was embarrassed by her sarcasm. Humph, I'm talking about you. Young Master Moo, young Master Moo. Why? Are you interested in her? Minglan, it's not that I want to nag at you, but even if you like him, he might not like you. It's none of your business. Yi Minglan was so angry that it was difficult to distinguish between green and red. She angrily stomped her feet and left. Li Qingze turned around and glanced at the private room. The corners of his mouth curled into a sinister smile. He had long harbored designs on Yun Shirshir. Silence returned to the room. Yun Shirshir clutched her stomach and leaned on the table. Her lower abdomen was in severe cramping pain. She was in so much pain that her eyebrows were tightly knitted together. Her face was unbelievably distorted, and her entire face was deathly pale. Cold sweat trickled down his back. He didn't even have the strength to speak. I'm going to die. What a tragedy. Every time her period came, her stomach would always hurt. When it hurt, she would toss and turn in bed. Even using a hot water bottle to cover it didn't help. This time was no exception. What made her even more anxious was that she had returned so suddenly, especially in front of this man. What was worse was that she was wearing a dress. It was fine, but now she was even stained on the stool. How could she have the nerve to move her? But it was simply too embarrassing. At the thought of this, Yun Shirshir's face was so red that it was about to bleed. She couldn't even cry. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows when he saw her pale face and cold sweat on her forehead. Are you not feeling well? When he asked this, Yun Shirshir was embarrassed and scared. She stammered, Mu Yaja, can you go out for a while? Go out? What was this woman up to again? What's wrong? She forced a smile and said, No, I'm fine. Chapter 383. Mu Yaja stared at her coldly for a long time and lost his patience. He thought that she was feeling unwell, but was too stubborn to tell him. Thus, he went forward without thinking and put his arm around her waist and knees, hugging her in his arms. However, she screamed. Ah! It was so sharp and ear-piercing that it almost broke his eardrums. Shut up! Mu Yaja frowned unhappily. She was so frightened that she choked. Shut up! After half a second of silence, suddenly Mu Yaja. Her voice was as soft as a sheep's. What's wrong? He looked down and saw that her face was strangely flushed. Mu Yaja suddenly sensed that something was wrong. He glanced at the stool and saw the glaring red blood on it. His heart skipped a beat, and he looked at her. Blood. She was injured. What happened? Yun Shirshir was so embarrassed that her face was turning redder. She was afraid that she would get the stain on him, and was so anxious that she was about to cry. She almost cried out, Mu Yaja, put me down. He ignored her and looked even more gloomy. He only asked, Where are you hurt? Yun Shirshir rolled her eyes weakly. Her face was so hot that it was unreasonable. She replied in a soft voice, No, I'm not hurt anywhere. You're not going to tell me? The man's eyes were sharp, and his tone was irresistible. I'll take you to the hospital. F*CK. Go to the hospital? She didn't think so. She hurriedly grabbed his collar and stammered, My period is here. Her voice was so soft that Mu Yaja didn't hear her at all. Seeing that the man was still holding her and walking out of the door, Yun Shirshir was so angry that she collapsed. She was so anxious that she wanted to scratch him. What should she do? She mustered her courage and raised her voice slightly. Mu Yaja, my period is here today. The man suddenly stopped in his tracks. she said mischievously. So, we don't have to go to the hospital. Just help me buy some hygiene products. Seeing that he didn't respond for a long time, Yin Shirshir hesitated and said softly, I'll use Sophie's brand. A deathly silence followed. She saw that Mu Yaja's face had completely darkened. Was there anything more tragic than this? She originally thought that the atmosphere would continue like this, but she didn't expect the man to pick up the suit jacket on the back of the chair with one hand and cover her body with it. Her body was completely covered, and he hugged her and walked out of the door. Yin Shirshir was a little flustered. He didn't know where he was going to take her. He wouldn't take her to the hospital, would he? Mu Yaja, where are you going? Go to the hotel and change your clothes. His words were concise, but his cold words made her feel inexplicably at ease. Yin Shirshir heaved a sigh of relief and calmed down. She felt a little embarrassed from all the attention she had received along the way. She lowered her head and snuggled into his chest. Hot, resolute, and fit. Through the shirt, that beating heartbeat was so powerful. Thump, thump. It was so clear and intimate that her breathing became chaotic. However, she felt warm in her heart. She still remembered that when she first had her period, she didn't know anything and had panicked. She had been in so much pain that she had tossed and turned in bed. Her father had bought sanitary pads for her and brought her hot tea. He had rubbed her abdomen through her clothes. She had never been so intimate with a man other than her father. Not to mention that the man in front of her was Mu Yaja. Chapter 384. She sneaked a peek at his extraordinarily handsome side profile. His high nose bridge, cold thin lips, arrogant chin, and the slightly open collar of his shirt revealing his sexy and distinct collarbones. He was like a god who had walked out of an ancient Greek mural. Every stroke of his was like the outline of a work of the gods. He was extremely handsome. She couldn't help but admit that if she put aside his bad behavior, she might really be attracted to him. As she stared at him in a daze, Mu Yaja sensed that she was looking at him intently. He frowned and lowered his eyes, his expression cold. What's wrong? Yin Shirshir was stunned. She quickly collected her thoughts and turned her face away from him. She actually tasted a little sweetness in her heart, even though he still had that cold and dark expression on his face. In her memory, no one had ever treated her so well and cared about her before. In the hotel suite, Mu Yaja put her down. Yin Shirshir immediately scampered to the bathroom like a fleeing rabbit. The man stared coldly at the door that slammed shut and turned to leave. Half a second later, a certain shy woman sullenly opened the door a crack. She leaned against the doorway and pleaded feebly, Mu Yaja, help me buy a pack of sanitary pads now. Mu Yaja said coldly, I'll get someone to buy it. Yin Shirshir was shocked. No, Mu Yaja, don't ask someone else to buy it, okay? How embarrassing. The man's cold face tensed up and darkened. What's the difference? She was speechless. Yes, there was no difference. It was just that when she thought of those chauffeurs around him and how they were all burly men, she felt awkward. But she couldn't bring herself to say it, so she pouted and threw a tantrum. I don't care. If you don't buy it, I won't use it. Woman, don't be willful. Yin Shirshir whined pitifully. Mu Yaja, the man's face turned cold. He ignored her, but he didn't say a word. He turned around resolutely. She was so angry that she frowned. This man was too heartless. He wouldn't abandon her like this, would he? 5 minutes later, when this proud son of a famous family in the capital, a man of great fame in the business world, stood in the column of women's products, when the man's elegant and slender hand picked up the small, cute, and delicate Sophie sanitary pads, the people in the supermarket looked at him in surprise. Colorful gazes sized him up, scrutinizing him. Mu Yaja tightened his grip on the bag as the blood and chi in his chest churned. His cold gaze swept over, and his icy gaze caused the temperature of the entire place to plummet. Below zero, what were his thoughts? In any case, it was worse than being shot. He didn't know much about these things, so he bought a bunch of them day and night. At the checkout, the cashier stared blankly at the pink and blue sanitary pads in front of her. The cute pink and blue contrasted sharply with the man's stiff face. Oh my God, how much did he need to buy so many? It was enough to use for a few years. However, when she caught a glimpse of the beautifully packaged cotton women's underwear, her eyes widened. Could he be a pervert? Looking at the well-dressed and handsome man in front of her, she couldn't imagine it. Muyaja stuck his hands in his pants and felt the strange gaze from the cashier. He glanced at her coldly. The cashier obediently lowered her head and didn't dare to take another look. She braced herself and wrapped them up properly. When she saw the man leave, her back was covered in cold sweat. Oh my God, what a terrifying aura. Chapter 385. Yun Shirshir was waiting anxiously in the bathroom when she heard a commotion outside, followed by a light knock on the bathroom door. However, it was not a man's deep voice that rang out. "Miss Yun, I'm here to deliver something to you on the CEO's orders." The one who spoke was a gentle female voice. When Yun Shirshir opened the door, she was greeted by the room manager in her uniform. Her face instantly turned red when she saw the huge supermarket shopping bag in her hand. "Did you buy these?" "No, these are all from CEO Mu. Miss Yun, CEO Mu treats you so well. Which man would be willing to buy these things himself?" Yun Shirshir's heart warmed at her words. She took the bag from her and inspected it carefully. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. "So many? Don't you know that these things have a shelf life?" As she rummaged through the bag, she found a pair of exquisite cotton underwear. She blushed when she realized that her underwear was dirty. She did not expect him to be so considerate. "Where is he?" The woman smiled. "Are you asking about CEO Mu? There's a board meeting coming up. I'm afraid it'll be late, so he asked you to rest first." Although it was a board meeting, it was actually a car race in the mountains to calm down. "Oh, he's so busy." Yun Shirshir took a shower and changed before taking a taxi home. She lay on the soft king-sized bed and rolled around contentedly. She suddenly thought of something and sat in front of the vanity mirror, looking at the pair of small and cute earrings. Her lips curled up slightly. She touched the earrings contentedly and turned off the lights to sleep. That night, Yun Shirshir slept peacefully. The next day, Yun Shirshir rushed to the company early in the morning. She had taken a day off yesterday, so when she returned to the training class, she felt that the atmosphere was different. She did not know why, but all the trainees in the class were very polite to her. Jiang Yutong, especially, wanted to avoid her whenever she saw her. This was good, too. At least she could have some peace. In the evening, Yun Shirshir reached home. The moment she opened the door, the warm light in the living room enveloped her. "I'm back." Yun Yeching was setting the table when he heard the door open. He rubbed his hands and walked to the entrance. "You're back. Is Mommy back?" Yun Tianyu poked his head out of the kitchen. Seeing that it was her, he immediately jumped into her embrace and gave her a big kiss. Smack! A kiss was printed on her cheek. Little Munchkin smiled sweetly. "Mommy, welcome home." Yun Shirshir hugged him. Little Munchkin was wearing a cartoon apron, and his face was covered in flour. He must have prepared dinner for her. The long-lost warmth filled her heart. Yun Shirshir pouted and said, "One isn't enough. Give me another baby." Mwah! Switching to the other cheek, he generously gave her another sweet kiss. the mother and son were in a mess at the entrance. "How was the summer camp? Is it fun?" Yun Shirshir asked as she rubbed his head. He pouted. "It's not fun at all. It's boring." The summer camp organized by the kindergarten was mostly parent-child activities. It was undoubtedly very interesting for children of the same age, but for Yun Tianyu, it was childish. Then he asked nervously, "Mommy, you're home early today? Is work going well?" "It's going well." Chapter 386. Little Munchkin asked with an innocent smile on his face. However, in his heart, he was plotting something. If he found out who bullied his mommy, he would definitely not let them off easily. Yun Shirshir did not know what the little lad was thinking as she smiled and replied, "No, I didn't." "Shirshir, quickly sit down. You has prepared dinner for you." Yun Yeching immediately took her bag, took her coat, and hung it on the hanger. In the afternoon, Yu took a small purse and said that he was going to the supermarket to buy some ingredients. He was surprised and worried about the little lad going out alone, so he followed him to the supermarket. Who knew that he would be taken aback when he followed him? Just as he stepped into the vegetables section of the supermarket, Yu rushed into the crowd with a basket of vegetables in hand. His figure agilely maneuvered among the haggling voices as if he was familiar with the process. He was very particular about buying, picking, and matching the meat and vegetables. He did not even need to do anything, as he picked the freshest ingredients at the most affordable price. It was not that Yun Yeching was not surprised. When Yun Shirshir was so young, she could not even differentiate between vegetables and spinach. Even when he was her age, he was not so good at it. The little lad, on the other hand, seemed to be very familiar with the process, as he could distinguish all the dishes clearly. What surprised him even more was that the little lad was very meticulous in picking the vegetables. The vegetables he picked were fresh and green in color, without any damage or holes. When he bought the meat, he even knew how to carefully smell it to ensure that the meat was pure and had no stench. He even gently pressed it with his finger. Yun Yeching, who was standing at the side, could not help feeling curious. When he asked about it, he heard the little lad saying, "First, smell the meat and then press it to see if it's elastic and glossy. If it's slaughtered after death, then the meat will be dark red in color, and there will be purplish-red blood stasis in the blood vessels. Eating it will make you sick." Yun Yeching was dumbfounded. The fish must have dense and complete scales, bright and clear eyes, plump and slightly protruding cheeks, and bright red cheeks. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fresh. Little Munchkin grabbed a fish and explained seriously. Yun Yeching was thoroughly convinced. Seeing his father's dumbfounded look, Yun Tianyu thought to himself that he had never seen him haggling with those aunties at the market before. That level of haggling was simply a tyrant. Now that his living conditions were better, he was too lazy to bargain, but he was especially picky about the freshness of the ingredients. After buying the ingredients and returning home, he put on an apron and brought a small stool over. Washing and selecting the vegetables, Zhang Xian's movements were practiced. Slicing and dicing the meat into shreds, his knife skills weren't as superb as those of a five-star chef. However, with a single cut, the meat slices were even and thin, and the shreds were well-proportioned and beautiful. After stir-frying, the meat slices were extremely flavorful. Yun Yeching wanted to help at first, but the little lad chased him to the side. He then stared blankly at the bustling scene in the kitchen. In less than 2 hours, a sumptuous feast was prepared. Out of curiosity, Yun Yeching snuck a taste of the opium fish. The meat was tender and delicious, and the taste was neither salty nor bland. Although it was a home-cooked dish, its standard was not inferior to that of a five-star hotel. Yun Yeching was completely petrified and felt like crying. He was so touched that he wanted to cry. Chapter 387. Even now, Yun Yeching was still in shock. When Yun Shirshir sat down at the table, he mumbled, "Shirshir, these dishes are all made by the child. Yes, my Yu is the best." Yun Shirshir rubbed the little lad's head lovingly. Yun Tianyu slapped her hand away and tidied up his messy hair before reproaching helplessly, "It's Mommy's fault for being so clumsy. Her cooking doesn't taste good." Yun Shirshir looked embarrassed. Yu is so smart. Mommy is ashamed of her inferiority." Yun Yeching was even more amazed by his grandson's capability. He clicked his tongue in wonder. It's a good thing that he knows how to share your chores at such a young age. At first, I was worried that he wouldn't get into trouble because he's just a child. Now that I think about it, his culinary skills aren't learned in a day or two. After a pause, he asked quizzically, "When did you start learning how to cook?" "When he was 6. Yun Shirshir thought for a while. "Stupid mommy. He was 4. "All right, if noodles count." She remembered that when he was 4, Yu made her a bowl of Yangchen noodles, which tasted pretty good. Actually, Yu did not like to cook, especially the smell of oil and fumes. He only enjoyed the sense of accomplishment and happiness that cooking brought. Every time he saw his mommy eating the delicious food he made, that sense of accomplishment made him feel as if he were the most amazing person in the world. Being able to bring happiness to his mommy was the happiest thing in his life. "Mommy, let me test you on a question." He winked mysteriously at her. "Guess what day it is tomorrow?" Yun Shirshir swallowed a mouthful of rice and pretended to be racking her brains. She asked meekly, "Oh, is it Sunday?" "Stupid mommy, tomorrow is Saturday." Yun Tianyu looked defeated as he pouted helplessly. Oh, then I remembered wrongly. Guess again, guess again." Yun Tianyu put down his bowl and chopsticks and propped his chin on his hand. His twinkling eyes gazed at her with a gentle smile. "Is it the parent-teacher conference?" Yun Shirshir guessed again. "No, it's an important day for Mommy and me." Yu saw that she had not guessed correctly even after racking her brains. She looked upset, and her little face scrunched up. She felt sad and wronged. Yun Shirshir couldn't figure it out. "What day is that?" Seeing her look of innocence and bewilderment, Yun Tianyu suddenly clutched his chest with a grief-stricken look, silently complaining about her carelessness. "It's Yu's birthday." Yun Shirshir pretended to be enlightened. "Oh, I remember now. Tomorrow is Yu's birthday. It's Children's Day." Yu was so angry that his face turned red. He crossed his arms and pouted so hard that one could hang a lamp. "Humph, stupid mommy. You don't have Yu in your heart anymore. You don't even know Yu's birthday." With that, the little guy covered his face and cried sorrowfully. Woo. Mommy doesn't love Yu anymore. Yu is so sad. Stop joking, baby. How can Mommy forget Yu's most important day?" Yun Shirshir's heart ached when she saw his aggrieved look. She hurriedly coaxed him. The little lad turned his head and snorted arrogantly. Yun Shirshir saw this and smiled helplessly. She secretly took out an exquisitely wrapped gift box from her bag and handed it to him. She wanted to give him a surprise. Chapter 388. Yu is Mommy's little angel. How could Mommy forget that tomorrow is Yu's birthday? I wish you a happy birthday and happy Children's Day in advance. Yu received the present from her with a confused look. It took him a while to realize that his mommy was teasing him. How could Mommy forget his birthday? He lowered his head to look at the exquisite packaging and saw the words "Happy Birthday, Baby" written on the card. His small fingers brushed past the words written by Yun Shirshir herself. The ink on the card had completely dried, making it look beautiful. The little lad's eyes softened as he stared at it. His face which had been full of grievances, suddenly brightened up, hugging the present. The little lad's face was filled with contentment. This was the happiest moment of his life. "Thank you, Mommy." Yun Tianyu was in such a good mood that his pair of calves could not help but sway. "Tomorrow is Mommy's birthday, too." With that, Yu Yu affectionately hugged Yun Shirshir's face and planted a deep kiss on it. "Mommy has worked hard. Mommy gave you life. You will spend the rest of his life by Mommy's side. I won't let Mommy suffer any grievances or hardships." Every word that came out of little Munchkin's mouth was extremely solemn. It sounded like a sacred speech. Yun Shirshir smiled. "Baby is so obedient." Then, "Mommy, do you have work tomorrow?" "I think so." Yun Shirshir thought for a while. She had to rush to the set early in the morning for a makeup test. Dong, hearing this, Yun Tianyu hung his head dejectedly. Yun Shirshir could not bear to see his desolate look. Suddenly, she thought of something and said, "Mommy should be free in the afternoon, though." Then, "Mommy, let's go to Fairy Tale Valley." Yu was excited again. As if by magic, he took out 2 tickets to Fairy Tale Valley from his pocket. Fairy Tale Valley was the world's most famous and popular fairy tale-themed amusement park. It was co-founded by LoveLore Holdings and NE Group. It had opened 6 resorts all over the world and was popular all over the world. It was the fairy tale kingdom that children yearned for the most. "All right, but where did these tickets come from?" "It's a birthday present from the principal," he casually replied. Fairy Tale Valley. As the biggest shareholder of LoveLore Holdings, he also owns some shares in Fairy Tale Valley. It's just 2 tickets, and he can get it easily. "Yes, Mommy will pick you up at noon tomorrow." You quickly open it and take a look. "What did Mommy give you?" Yun Yeching was in such a good mood that he wanted to tease him. Yun Tianyu enjoyed the process of opening presents the most. In the past, when Yun Shirshir gave him a toy on his birthday, he carefully kept it. Last year, his mother had given him a set of toy sets, and he had always been careful with them. Generally speaking, children of this age only had a sense of novelty towards toys. The new toys that their parents bought were just for the sake of novelty. When they bought them back, they would be unable to put them down for a few days and play very happily. However, it didn't take long for him to get bored of it and toss it aside. The more mischievous ones would be broken before he got bored of them. Yu was different, though. Chapter 389. He wondered what his mommy had given him this time. He unwrapped the gift box and opened it expectantly. However, he was surprised to see a smart GPS watch lying quietly inside the box. His eyebrows twitched a little. LoveLore Holdings' newly launched Smart Sports watch could be used for video calls, GPS global positioning, and had a 1-button alarm function. Could he say that he designed this watch? He wanted to cry but had no tears. Did it mean that his mommy's gift had helped his company generate revenue from this watch? "Do you like it?" Yun Shirshir looked at him expectantly, anticipating his amazement. His eyebrows twitched a little, but when he raised his head, he put on an innocent smile. "I like it. You likes Mommy's gift." Mu residence. After dinner, Mu Yaja walked to the study room and saw Xiao Yichen painstakingly working on an exercise book. He was trying his best to calculate with his fingers. His physique was amazing, but he was weak in science. Those math problems that were so simple to Yun Tianyu could not wait to calculate them one by one for Xiao Yichen. When it came to addition and subtraction, there was still hope. When it came to multiplication and division, the little guy just wanted to roll his eyes and lie down. He seemed to have some ideas. He was just a little bit away. Therefore, he did not notice the steady footsteps coming from outside the door. Click! It seemed that someone had pushed the door open. His footsteps were casual as he strolled in with the posture of a king. The man did not speak. He walked to the table and looked at the little lad who was sprawled on the table. He was wearing fluffy white pajamas. At first glance, he looked like a cat with pure white fur. Still, this little guy was much cuter than a cat. The little guy lowered his head and seriously racked his brains as he looked down at him. His eyelashes, which were thick and long like black phoenix feathers, must have inherited his mother's genes. They covered his eyes and left a faint shadow on his eyelids. He reached out and flipped through the textbook she had placed at the side. Little Chen was startled. He caught a glimpse of that hand from the corner of his eye. It had fair skin, slender fingers, and well-defined knuckles. He could not help but raise his head in astonishment, only to see the man with his head lowered and flipping through her high school textbook. His handsome face was calm, and his lips seemed to have a gentle curve. The study room was lit by a table lamp. In the half-light, half of his handsome face was buried in the shadows. His expression could not be seen clearly, but there was a deadly handsomeness about him. There seemed to be no expression on his face. Xiao Chen always felt that his daddy had the innate aura of a king. His every movement was extraordinary, as if he was born to be a king. People could not help but submit to him. He yearned to be a man like his daddy. The little guy hurriedly stood up, not knowing what to do. These exercises were given to him by Mu Yaja. He had given him an entire afternoon to solve 1,000 exercises. However, he had racked his brains day and night and had only solved 370. He was already dizzy. Mu Yaja had always been strict with his studies. Xiao Yichen felt guilty that he could not satisfy his daddy. Chapter 390. Mu Yaja raised his eyes and saw the man standing at the side with his head hung low. His lips curled into a smile as he walked to the table and sat down on the chair. Xiao Yichen had just let out a sigh of relief when he saw his father reach out and gently pull him into his embrace. He sat in his father's embrace and smelled his delicate fragrance. He couldn't help but hug his father's waist. "Daddy, I haven't finished the math problem." "Which one?" The man's magnetic voice sounded above his head. Xiao Yichen flipped open the notebook and pointed at the questions. He whispered, "These questions? I don't know how to solve them." Mu Yaja calmly picked up the pen and wrote down a few multiplication tables. Soon, he solved the problem. Xiao Yichen blinked in astonishment. He grabbed the notebook and looked at it again and again. Yes, that's how he solved it. He just couldn't remember the formula. No matter how hard he thought, he couldn't figure it out. Thus, he was trapped in the math problem. "Which one?" Xiao Yichen shook his head and said, "That's all." "You didn't memorize the multiplication table?" "I memorized it. I'm not familiar with it." Xiao Yichen revealed a bitter and vengeful expression. Mu Yaja gently smiled. He looked very good when he smiled. His long and narrow eyes curved slightly, and his thin lips curved slightly. His smile was truly breathtaking. Even if you exhausted all the beautiful words in the world, it would still be indescribable. He was making calculations in his notebook while explaining to him in a soft voice. His clear voice was as pleasant as spring water. His voice was clearly feminine and mellow, but it sounded so soft and pleasant to the ears. The little fellow suddenly felt that if this man became a teacher, he would definitely be an outstanding teacher. He explained very seriously and didn't miss any details. Even though the little fellow was distracted, he still understood his thoughts. He raised his head and revealed a bright and beautiful smile with 2 cute dimples at the corner of his lips. "Daddy is so awesome. If only you could accompany me to do questions every day." Mu Yaja looked at little Munchkin's smiling face and suddenly became distracted. She recalled Yun Tianyo's arrogant and unruly face. Genes were truly inconceivable. Of the two little fellows, one was proficient in literature and the other in martial arts. Yun Tianyo's physique was barely satisfactory, but he was exceptionally intelligent. Although Xiao Yichen's intelligence was not as top-notch as Yun Tianyo's, his physique was better than his younger self's. He had an extraordinary talent in firearms and combat. Do you know what day it is tomorrow? Mu Yaja lowered his head and whispered into the little fellow's ear. Xiao Yichen frowned and thought hard for a while. Then he shook his head and said, I don't know. Mu Yaja poked the little fellow's head and said speechlessly, Don't you remember your own birthday? Xiao Yichen pouted aggrievedly and helplessly said, I really forgot. As if by magic, Mu Yaja took out an exquisitely wrapped gift box from his pocket and passed it to him. Little Yichen's eyes widened in surprise when his gaze landed on the present. He was a little taken aback by this unexpected surprise. Hugging the present, his little face was unusually bashful and excited. The little fellow's emotions were always restrained, which was very similar to Mu Yaja. Be it happiness or sadness, they rarely showed on his face and were buried deep in his heart. However, he was still a child. When the gift landed in front of him, a heartfelt joy arose spontaneously. Chapter 391. Especially when she opened the gift, every minute and every second was filled with joy and inexplicable anticipation. Mu Yaja had given him presents before. Every year on his birthday, he would give him anything that Xiao Yichen liked or wanted. To him, there was nothing that he could not get, only things that his child could not think of. Therefore, no matter what the present was, as long as he asked, it would immediately fly to his side. Therefore, no matter how precious the present was, he would get it if he wanted it. However, this would also cause the child to lose the mood to cherish the present. As long as he opened his mouth, there was nothing that he could not get. Therefore, he played with Mu Yaja's presents for a few days. When he was tired of them, he threw them aside and did not ask about them anymore. It was hard for a child to have feelings of wanting to cherish something that was easily obtained. The harder it was to obtain, the more one cherished it. After all, compared to women, men were not as meticulous. In the past, when it was Xiao Yichen's birthday, Mu Yaja would always ask him in advance what he liked and what he wanted as a present. Mu Yaja would send someone to buy whatever he liked and give it to him. There was no exquisite packaging or beautiful card. Therefore, the birthday present did not have the anticipation and surprise that a birthday present should have. Mu Wanru's attitude towards his birthday was also not very attentive. Most of the time, she would pay for whatever Xiao Yichen liked. It was a cold process. However, this was not strange. After all, he was not her biological son. Without blood ties, she did not pay much attention to the details. She seemed to dote on the child, but on the surface, it was only for the sake of Mu Yaja and Grandpa Mu. In her heart, her attitude towards the child was neither hot nor cold. She did not give birth to him, so how much could she dote on him? Children were naive by nature. Their anticipation for their birthday was nothing more than the surprise and yearning for the mysterious present. The moment when they opened the present was always thrilling, full of anticipation and fantasy. However, for Xiao Yichen, the action of opening the present seemed to be numb. This was because he knew what kind of present his daddy gave him, because he knew there was no surprise and no anticipation. However, when Mu Yaja magically presented a beautifully wrapped present to him, Xiao Yichen's childlike innocence was instantly awakened. "Daddy, is this my birthday present?" Xiao Yichen blinked his bright eyes and asked curiously. "Yes." "What present is it?" He was so curious. "Open it and take a look." However, little Yichen frowned and pouted, appearing to be vexed. "What's wrong?" Mu Yaja asked when he noticed his odd expression. "I can't bear to open it." Xiao Yichen muttered. "Can't bear to?" Mu Yaja, did not know whether to laugh or cry. Why can't bear with it? I don't know, I can't describe it. As Xiao Yichen spoke, his cheeks were pink and flushed with excitement. The feeling of anticipation was like a furry cat's paw that kept scratching at her heart. His heart thumped. It was the first time he tasted the feeling of nervousness and anticipation. Xiao Yichen untied the ribbon and carefully tore open the wrapping paper layer by layer. His extremely serious and focused expression made him look like a devout Christian. Chapter 392. Xiao Yichen's mouth was slightly agape. He was a little surprised, but more than that, he was pleasantly surprised and curious. "Daddy, what is this?" Mu Yaja explained it to him. "This is a smartwatch. It has a call function, navigation, and GPS. Look, this is a one-button alarm." The man's voice was low, gentle, and magnetic. Xiao Yichen leaned comfortably in Mu Yaja's arms and immersed himself in his gentle explanation. The study room was filled with tenderness. Xiao Yichen quickly learned all the functions of the watch. The watch's design was extraordinary. In fact, it had more than just the functions mentioned above. There were also some hidden applications that were very useful for children of this age. However, if Mu Yaja knew that this watch was one of the many products designed by Yun Tianyu, what would he think? Fun. He. Xiao Yichen wore the watch on his wrist and waved it in front of Mu Yaja as if to show off. He proudly said, "This watch looks much better than those that Daddy wears." Mu Yaja chuckled. It was rare for the little guy to reveal such a pure and romantic smile. Seeing him happy, the corners of his lips could not help but curl up. He was in a good mood. "Baby, your birthday is coming soon." He caressed the little guy's head and gently planted a kiss on his forehead. Xiao Yichen blushed. He hugged Mu Yaja's shoulders and kissed him on the cheek. "Thank you, Daddy. How do you want to celebrate your birthday tomorrow?" Xiao Yichen pondered for a moment before saying softly, "I want to go to the amusement park." "Amusement park?" Fairy Tale Valley Amusement Park. I heard that it's fun. Are you free?" Mu Yaja was silent for a moment. He filtered through the schedule for tomorrow in his mind and said helplessly, "Daddy's schedule is full tomorrow." Xiao Yichen lowered his head, feeling a little lonely. "Let Mommy go with you tomorrow, okay?" "No." Xiao Yichen looked conflicted. "I just want Daddy to play with me. Good boy, Daddy doesn't have time. Next time, Mu Yaja patiently coaxed him, his tone revealing some guilt and self-blame. There was a very important planning meeting tomorrow that couldn't be postponed. Xiao Yichen looked at him pitifully. In the end, he nodded reluctantly and gave in. He was not a willful child. Even though he had nodded and compromised, it didn't mean that he wasn't disappointed. It wasn't the first or second time she had experienced such a lonely birthday. He really wanted to go to the amusement park with his daddy, playing the pirate ship and the merry-go-round. Although these rides were not very attractive in his eyes, it would be very interesting if his daddy accompanied him, right? It would definitely be fun. He could understand that his daddy was busy. Such a big company needed to be managed, and he might not have the time to accompany him all the time. He was not greedy, though. He only hoped that his daddy would take some time out to accompany him on his birthday. This thought had become an extravagant hope. Xiao Yichen was a little unhappy. However, even if he was unhappy, he could not show it on his face. As a father, he was not as meticulous and gentle as a mother. From a certain perspective, perhaps Yun Tianyu was happier than Xiao Yichen. Chapter 393. Be it the gifts or the schedule, they were all meticulously prepared for the sake of leaving a beautiful memory for the child. Thus, with more or less regret, Xiao Yichen did not sleep well that night. His heart ached as he hid under the blanket. He wanted his daddy to accompany him to the amusement park. This was the real surprise he was looking forward to. The next day, Yun Shirshir woke up very early. Today was the day of the trial photo shoot, so she had to make preparations in advance to improve her skin to its best condition, moisturize, and maintain her skin in one go. Her skin was relatively tender, so it was easy for her to apply makeup. No matter what kind of makeup she used, it would look clear and natural. Hence, when she usually appeared barefaced, people would often mistake her for wearing a thick layer of foundation. Even so, she still made sufficient preparations in advance. The car that Qinzhou had arranged for her was already waiting at the entrance. She got in the car. The trial photo shoot was arranged to be held at the set's studio. The trial photo shoots and promotional photos would be done here. When she arrived at the set, the timing was just right. The staff arrived one after another. Qinzhou did not come today, but the assistant that he had arranged for her had already arrived. The assistant that Qinzhou had arranged for her was called Xiao Mu. She used to be his right-hand woman, but because she was reliable, she was assigned to be Yun Shirshir's assistant. Shirshir, hello. From now on, I'll be your assistant. My surname is Mu, and my name is Mu Shi. You can just call me Xiao Mu. Xiao Mu warmly welcomed her and introduced herself. Yun Shirshir smiled and sized her up. Xiao Mu looked very young, about 25 or 26 years old. She had a sweet appearance, and from her style of dress and style of conversation, she should be a very efficient woman. Although she was only 25 or 26 years old, she had entered the industry at a very early age. Qinzhou was grooming her as his successor, and she might develop into a manager in the future. Yun Shirshir smiled and said, "Hello, Xiao Mu. Please take care of me in the future." She winked mischievously and held her hand with a sweet smile. "Yes, thank you. I'll be in your care in the future. Aren't you being too distant with me?" Mu Shi pouted mischievously and continued, "I've heard of your name before. Yun Shirshir. Not only does your name sound good, but you're also very beautiful. You're even prettier than in the photos." Xiao Mu sincerely praised, her eyes filled with admiration and intimacy. "You're flattering me." Yun Shirshir was a little embarrassed by her compliments and exclamations, so she tried to be humble. The two chatted for a while more before Mu. She suddenly raised her wrist to look at the time and hurriedly said, "It's getting late. Let me bring you to the dressing room. Time is tight. We have to prepare in advance." She, of course, for the time being, Xiao, of course. Along the way, Mu Shi led the way, occasionally turning back to add, "According to the order of the lead roles, we should be the second to audition. Since Gu Xingze isn't here yet, you should be the first one." Of you, of course of you." As she spoke, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. Where is the makeup room?" Yun Shirshir asked. "You don't know where the makeup room is." Chapter 394. With that, she hurriedly chased after a few production assistants nearby. Patting one of them on the shoulder, she inquired about the location of the main lead's dressing room. A few stage managers were currently in a terrible fix. When they turned around and saw that it was a newbie assistant, they sized her up. Seeing that she looked unfamiliar, they guessed that she must be the assistant of a newbie actor and not someone close to a big shot. Hence, they did not bother with her and sent her away in annoyance with an extremely cold attitude. "Can't you find one yourself? I'm busy right now. Stay away." Mu Shi was caught off guard and was given the cold shoulder. She had always been by Qinzhou's side as an assistant. Even when a big director saw her, he would give her a warm smile. Hence, being looked down upon by a few production assistants, she was so angry that her face turned ashen. When she returned, she did not forget to scold them indignantly. "A bunch of snobs." As she spoke, she suddenly saw Yan Bingqing gracefully walking over. Yan Bingqing was now the hottest topic in the entertainment industry. Her every move was eye-catching. Fashion queen, topic queen, advertisement queen, scandal queen. She was now Huan Yu's A-lister. Although she did not have any representative works to show, her acting standards were often criticized by the media. Most of the movies she starred in had mediocre reviews and terrible reviews. She was known as the poison of the box office. Still, her looks were definitely heavenly and demonic. In the face of a peerless beauty, other conditions did not seem so important. Upon seeing the actress, the few stage supervisors changed their cold and aloof attitude toward Mushi and immediately bowed to greet her. They took on an incomparably flattering posture and served her well. This time, Mushi was even more furious. What kind of people are they? Are they obviously flattering someone and stepping on me? However, there was only so much she could complain about. After being by Qinzhou's side for so many years, she had always believed in being careful with her words and actions. Moreover, Yan Bingqing's background was not simple, so it was not good to offend her. Although she was furious, she repeatedly reminded herself to suppress her anger and not cause any trouble for Yun Shirshir. Yun Shirshir also saw the change in attitude of the stage supervisors, but she did not say anything. This was only human nature. Little Mu, don't be angry. It's not a big deal. Shirshir, I feel indignant on your behalf. Mu, she snorted, clearly feeling indignant on her behalf. The two of them fumbled around the huge set for a while and soon found their dressing room. The dressing room is over here. As she spoke, she pushed the door open and walked in. Coincidentally, Yan Bingqing was also in the dressing room. Yun Shirshir was a little stunned. She remembered that her dressing room was the same as Gu Xingze's. Why is Yan Bingqing here too? Mu, she was a little puzzled. She pulled a production assistant to the side and asked softly, "Handsome, let me ask you, isn't this the dressing room of the main lead?" Lin Fengtian had specially instructed to arrange a separate dressing room for the two main leads. In this movie, Yan Bingqing was just a supporting role and a cameo. Why did she occupy the main lead's dressing room? Chapter 395. This dressing room is for the two main leads. However, Yan Bingqing said that she wants to use this one. Seeing that the superstar won't be here anytime soon, I can't really reject her. Mushi was displeased. This is the main lead's dressing room. Can't this Missy use another one? Behind her, Yan Bingqing's arrogant and provocative voice was heard. Why? Can I use this one? Mushi turned to look at her with an ugly expression. She then put on a professional smile. Sis Bingqing, it's not that you can't. It's like this. Our Shirshir is the first to do the test shoot, so she has to do her makeup quickly. All right, I got it. Although she's a newbie, I won't make things difficult for her. Let her share a dressing room with me. Yan Bingqing looked coldly at the mirror and did not look at her at all. She casually said this, yet her tone sounded as if she was doing her a favor. It was as if giving up half of the dressing room to Yun Shirshir was her doing a favor beyond the law. It was as if she had the right to decide who this dressing room belonged to. Mushi was so angry that her smiling face stiffened. This dressing room was clearly arranged for Shirshir. Now that she had snatched it away, she was still acting as if she was doing her a favor. How could she be so shameless? She was clearly trying to ostracize her. To put it nicely, Yan Bingqing was a guest star this time. In fact, she was already one of the female leads. One of the investors valued her and wanted to groom her. Alas, Lin Fengtian did not fancy her. She had no acting skills. Although her facial features were naturally beautiful, she had a mature charm and could not portray the innocence of a young girl at all. To sum it up, she looked old. Hence, she was heartlessly kicked out by Lin Fengtian. This Yan Bingqing must have seen that Lin Fengtian had chosen a newcomer. She must have held a grudge and was secretly jealous. However, despite her thoughts, Mushi did not dare to talk back to her. She only said in a neutral tone, "Where's the stylist? Hurry up and do your makeup." As soon as he finished speaking, a young woman wearing glasses hurriedly pushed open the door and walked in with a heavy bag in her hand. She was probably the stylist of the crew. She walked in, looked around, and said with a smile, "Sorry, there was a traffic jam on the road, so I came a little late. I'm really sorry. I'm the stylist of the crew. My surname is Ding, and my name is Ding Ning." After a pause, she asked, "Who's the lead?" Mushi smiled and held Yun Shirshir's hand. "Hello, Ms. Ding. This is the female lead, Yun Shirshir." Ding Ning immediately greeted politely, "Hello, Shirshir." Just as the atmosphere was harmonious, ahem, Yen Bingqing sat in front of the largest dressing table. Seeing that Ding Ning did not notice her immediately, she cleared her throat with a displeased expression. Ding Ning heard the noise and looked in the direction of the sound. When he saw that it was Yen Bingqing, a flash of embarrassment and annoyance passed in his eyes. He immediately smiled and said, "Sister Bingqing, MHM, come and do my makeup for me." "Alrighty." Ding Ning immediately carried her bag to Yen Bingqing's seat and opened it. Mushi was stunned. Yun Shirshir's eyes darkened slightly, but she remained calm and collected. No trace of anger could be seen on her face. She was a little unable to keep her cool. This dressing room was snatched, and now the stylist was snatched as well? This was too much. Shirshir was going to be the first. This time, Mushi was certain that Yen Bingqing was deliberately making things difficult for her. Lin Fengtian was known for his bad temper. Chapter 396. There was only one stylist in a dressing room. Yen Bingqing was clearly trying to embarrass Yun Shirshir. Mushi got Yun Shirshir to go to her seat first, and then walked toward Yen Bingqing. "Sister Bingqing, why don't we let Xiao Ding do Shirshir's makeup first?" Yen Bingqing arrogantly rolled her eyes. "Why?" "Because Shirshir is the first to go. If she's not ready by then, Director Lin will lose his temper again." Yen Bingqing sneered and said faintly, "Her makeup is so simple. Can't she do it herself?" With that, she turned to give Ding Ning a look. "Don't you think so, Xiao Ding?" Ding Ning was a little embarrassed for a moment. When she saw Yen Bingqing looking at her from the corner of her eye, she trembled and echoed, "Yes, the main lead's makeup is just a simple nude outfit. There's no need for eyeshadow. 2 layers of low gloss and some highlights will do. Sister Bingqing's makeup is more difficult to do, so I'll do her first." She was just an ordinary stylist. How would she dare to offend someone like Yen Bingqing? Mushi was furious. She was about to speak when someone held her shoulder. She turned around in surprise, only to see Yun Shirshir pulling her behind her with a smile. With a decent and elegant smile, she said to Yen Bingqing, "Sister Bingqing, you're my senior. According to the rules, you should go first, and I should respect you first." These words were really pleasant to hear. Yen Bingqing's brows relaxed a little. She even thought that this newbie was quite sensible. However, in the next second, she heard Yun Shirshir say, lightly, "Although I'm a newbie, I'm the female lead in this movie. I'm the first in line for today's test shoot, so Miss Ding should do my makeup first." Yen Bingqing's smile froze. "What did you say?" Ding Ning, who was behind him, was also stunned. Even Mushi was so shocked that they did not dare to breathe loudly. Sister Bingqing should have heard what I said very clearly. I'm the main character, and you're a supporting character. It's my turn to go first today. Yun Shirshir's tone was light, and her voice was soft. However, she enunciated every word clearly, neither servile nor overbearing. When Yen Bingqing heard this, Her chest seemed to explode. She couldn't even breathe properly. She stood up angrily and walked in front of her. "You're saying that I'm a supporting character and you're the main character? So, the county did your makeup? Is there a problem?" Yun Shirshir said helplessly, "Indeed, I'm the main character and you're the supporting character. I didn't say anything wrong. Besides, first of all, Miss Ding is my stylist. Second of all, this is my dressing room. I've already given you half of it. I'm already showing you respect and giving you face. Still, if you want to snatch the stylist away." She pursed her lips and pretended to be annoyed. Suddenly, she smiled and asked, "Why don't we invite Director Lin over to be the judge and see if Sister Bingqing should be the first to go up? Are you using Director Lin to pressure me?" Yen Bingqing was flustered and exasperated. However, she still had to maintain her composure on the surface as she gritted her teeth and stared at her. Yun Shirshir, however, was not afraid of her murderous glare and said lightly, "Sister Bingqing, your words are interesting. Clearly, you're using your status to ostracize me, right? Yes, I'm a newbie and have just debuted, but I respect you. On the other hand, don't you feel that you're bullying a newbie?" His words were spoken in a casual manner. However, every word was a gem. Chapter 397. Yen Bingqing's lips twitched. After scrutinizing her for a while, she sneered. "Good. Interesting. Yun Shirshir, let's wait and see." With that, she haughtily snorted, picked up her expensive Chanel handbag, and mercilessly bumped into Yun Shirshir's shoulder as she left. For a moment, the atmosphere in the dressing room froze. Ding Ming and Mu Shi, especially, looked at each other with pale faces. Yun Shirshir calmly sat down in front of the dressing mirror and calmly asked, "Miss Ding, although my makeup is simple, you are a professional. After all, my technique is definitely not as good as yours. Still, can you please show some professionalism? Come and do my makeup for me." Mushi was dumbfounded. She had previously heard from Qin Zhou that Yun Shirshir's character was somewhat aloof from worldly affairs and that she should take good care of her. How was she aloof from worldly affairs? Still, she liked it. She was a little worried that she would offend Yen Bingqing and bear a grudge against her from now on. However, this was how the entertainment industry was. Open and covert fights and scheming against each other would happen sooner or later. Yun Shirshir's role as Yin Xiaochuan was mostly set during her school days, so her makeup was all about purity and purity. Ding Ming applied a crystal-clear nude makeup on her and applied some pink blush on her cheeks, and the job was done. It was not a huge project, but it still took an hour. Nude makeup sounded simple, but it was the most important thing. A thick layer or a thin layer would not do. The scale was the most difficult to grasp. Still, this was considered fast. Ding Ming was envious. Her foundation is too good, and she's too beautiful. She'll definitely be famous if she can appear in Director Lin's film. Mushi glanced at her and was instantly stunned. She quickly led her to the studio. Everything was in order. Lin Fengtian was an impatient person. He looked at the time and asked impatiently, "Where is she? Is her makeup done?" Coming. Mushi hurried over. "Director Lin, look, the timing is just right. Shirshir's makeup is done. When do we start? Where is she?" "Let me take a look at him first," Lin Fengtian said. As soon as she finished speaking, Yun Shirshir slowly walked into the studio. At that moment, the entire studio lit up. She was dressed in a simple snow-white dress, slender and elegant. Her ink-colored hair was long enough to reach her waist, like high-quality satin, shiny and beautiful. Raising his head, he saw a face so beautiful that it was suffocating. She had fair skin, charming facial features, and a faint blush on her cheeks. Her eyebrows were as elegant as the clouds. Her eyes were as clear as the autumn waters, and her thin cherry red lips. She lowered her eyes, revealing a row of long and curly eyelashes that were as thick and long as a comb. They were like the finest black feathers, but also like the fluttering wings of a butterfly. She was excessively charming. Her pink lips were not adorned with any embellishments, but they were like fresh flower petals, tender and lovely. Lin Fengtian did not react for a long time. His gaze was fixed on her without blinking. For a moment, the huge studio was silent. Mushi's heart was in a mess. She knew that Lin Fengtian was very picky and strict when it came to filming. She was afraid that the makeup would not pass. She looked at him and saw that he could not hide the amazement in his eyes. Only then did her heart calm down. To be precise, he could not help but stare at her in a daze. He felt his whole body heating up, as if he were drunk. He was like a teenage boy who saw a girl he liked and could not take his eyes off her, no matter what. Chapter 398. Humans had a persistent pursuit of beauty. Yun Shirshir, on the other hand, was just standing there. Before she could act, Lin Fengtian had already gotten into character. A character who seemed to have walked out of a book. Yin Xiaochuan, who had walked out of the memories of her lost youth. She was so beautiful that she could not be tarnished by anything in the world. Director Lin? Mu, she cautiously called out from the side. Lin Fengtian suddenly returned to his senses and could not help but praise. Not bad. You have the feeling of Yin Xiaochuan. Yun Shirshir's lips curled into a slight smile when she heard this. She was in a good mood. The process of the test shoot went very smoothly. Yin Xiaochuan, who was played by Yun Shirshir, and Yin Dongyu, who was played by Gu Xingze, were biological siblings. This novel was about how the two were childhood sweethearts who relied on each other as they grew up. As they grew up, taboo feelings gradually developed between them. Yin Xiaochuan's character was simple and persistent. She was like a moth to a flame when it came to love. From the beginning to the end, she kept following Yin Dongyu's back. Yin Xiaochuan's infatuation was ultimately restrained by the world. Although Yin Dongyu's heart throbbed with love for her, he was forced to push her away time and time again due to ethics. Later, Yin Xiaochuan's mother unintentionally flipped through Yin Xiaochuan's diary. The desperate and sorrowful words of struggling in the abyss of misery were revealed. Only then did she realize that the siblings had developed feelings that they should not have. In a fit of anger, Yin Xiaochuan's mother sent her abroad to study. This was undoubtedly an exile. A few years later, Yin Xiaochuan received a long-distance call from her mother. Yin Dongyu had a fiancé and was about to get engaged. Yin Xiaochuan returned to her hometown with a sense of loss. However, in an accident, she was diagnosed with blood cancer. Yin Dongyu rushed to the hospital for a bone marrow examination, only to find out that his bone marrow and blood type did not match. The siblings were not related by blood. It turned out that when Yin Xiaochuan was born, the two children were swapped at birth, resulting in a torturous relationship. Lin Fengtian boasted of his ruthless foresight. Now, he was even more confident of his judgment. Yun Shirshir and Yin Xiaochuan's temperament was very compatible. With a slight smile, her pure and flawless aura instantly infected the entire set. Therefore, during the filming, even Lin Fengtian, who was known for his strictness, was full of praise and praise. This newbie is too suitable for the role of Yin Xiaochuan. It's as if he just walked out of a book. The styling director clicked her tongue in wonder. At the side, not far away, Yan Bingqing's eyebrows furrowed. She looked displeased. It was unknown whether it was because of jealousy or unwillingness, but there seemed to be a cluster of flames burning in her chest. She hadn't even started putting on her makeup yet. When she heard that it had already started, she especially rushed over to take a look. Lin Fengtian was famous for being harsh. There was not a single actor on his set who did not get scolded. Even if it was a veteran actor, he would not give them any face. She had once appeared in one of Lin Fengtian's movies and was scolded in front of the entire set. She saw how proud Yin Shishir was just now. She wanted to see how Lin Fengtian would scold this newbie. In the end, to everyone's surprise, Lin Fengtian was very satisfied with this newbie. Yan Bingqing's face was contorted with jealousy. Yin Shishir was an eyesore to her. She had treated her with such an attitude just now. Hence, Yan Bingqing had formed a grudge with her. Humph, Yin Shishir, there will be plenty of time in the future. In the future, I want to see how capable you are. How dare you offend me? Chapter 399. The weather was clear, and there were no clouds in the sky. Today was a good day to go out. Mu Yaja ended the meeting early and returned to the Mu residence. The servants were surprised to see him back. They had heard that he had an important meeting today, and that he should be home late. Why was he home so early? In fact, his schedule was full today. However, last night, when he found out that his precious son wanted him to accompany him to the amusement park, he made a decision in his heart even though he did not agree. He planned to celebrate his son's birthday with him properly. Therefore, he arranged a video conference overnight and arranged everything in advance. He arrived at the company early in the morning and ended the meeting early. He managed to squeeze out most of the day. When he rushed home, it was still early. The amusement park opened at 9 o'clock. Mu Yaja thought that today was Children's Day, and there would be a lot of people going to the amusement park. He carefully booked 2 VIP tickets. Usually, the amusement park would have VIP tickets. These tickets were usually expensive. Therefore, there were many attractions that could be enjoyed through the VIP channel, and there was no need to queue for too long. He wanted to let the little guy enjoy himself as much as possible in the limited time he had. Mu Yaja glanced around the living room and asked, "Where's the little young master?" "He's reading comics in his room. He didn't go to the amusement park." It was as expected. Without his company, the little guy probably had no interest in going anywhere. Yes, the young mistress originally wanted to take him to play, but the little young master said that he only wanted you to accompany him. So the young mistress accompanied the master to the Yongning temple to pray and eat vegetarian food. The servant told him the truth. "Yes, help me get ready. I'll go out later." "Yes, young master." The servant quickly went to prepare. When he went up to the second floor, the door to the study was ajar. He carefully pushed it open. His movements were light and silent. Therefore, Xiao Yichen, who was building Lego blocks in the study, did not realize that someone had entered the study. He was still immersed in his own world. He sat on the carpet with Lego blocks scattered in front of him. Only half of the castle was left. It must have collapsed halfway, and the Lego blocks were scattered everywhere. Little Yichen held the building blocks in his hand, but he just sat there motionlessly with his back facing her. He did not care about the scattered building blocks on the floor and just sat there in a daze. He did not speak or move at all. His back seemed to be in a daze, as if his soul had left his body. Mu Yaja stood rooted to the spot and did not move forward. Looking at the little lad's dejected back, he guessed that he was probably feeling sad right now. Children are usually emotional. It's Children's Day, and it's their birthday, but they don't have their parents by their side. Mu Yaja felt a stabbing pain in his heart. If he did not see this scene in front of him, at least in front of him, he would have known that Xiao Yiseken's behavior. What he did not know was that when he was not around, little Yichen was cold and aloof. He was even expressionless and taciturn when dealing with others. Just like when he was young, He closed himself off in his own world and did not get close to anyone. Muyaja slowly walked over. His heart ached. The time he spent with this child was indeed too little. Little Ichen's brows furrowed slightly when he heard footsteps behind him. Chapter 400. At that moment, he was in a bad mood, so it was inevitable that he mistook the person behind him for a servant. His tone was unfriendly. "Don't you knock before entering?" The footsteps didn't stop. How could this servant be so rude? He stood up angrily and turned around. However, when he saw the man who seemed to have descended from the sky, he opened his mouth in disbelief and was speechless for a long time. Dressed in a suit and leather shoes, Muyaja stuffed his hands into his pockets. Seeing the shock and disbelief written all over the boy's little face, he could not help laughing. "The door isn't closed, so I came in. Am I disturbing you?" "No." Xiao Yichen rubbed his eyes in a daze. He thought he was dreaming. Didn't he say that he had an important agenda today? Why was he back so early? "Daddy, why are you here?" "To celebrate my baby's birthday." Muyaja squatted down in front of him with a gentle expression. His handsome eyes were fixed on the little munchkin, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. "Why? Didn't you say that you wanted Daddy to accompany you to the amusement park? Do you still want to go?" Seeing that he didn't speak, Muyaja reached out and pinched his tender cheeks. "Why aren't you saying anything?" "Yes." Xiao Yichen suddenly cheered. "Daddy is awesome. Did Daddy specially rush back to accompany me?" Muyaja pulled him into his arms. "Then let's change before we go, okay?" "Okay." Xiao Yichen was so excited that his cheeks were flushed red. This was the biggest surprise that Muyaja had given him. The weather in June was like a child's day. It was unpredictable. Yesterday was a cloudy day, but today the sun was shining brightly. Muyaja had specially changed him into a casual outfit. A white top, aqua blue casual pants, a pair of air-cushioned shoes, a beret, and a pair of sunglasses. He looked like a fashionable young man. Xiao Yichen's handsome features and fair skin made him look more handsome than many children's fashion models. Muyaja followed suit and matched him in a father-son outfit. Similarly, he wore a white casual shirt, aqua blue cropped pants, and a pair of casual sneakers. He had shed his former business elite demeanor. Now that he was wearing casual makeup, he seemed to have lost a few years of his age. His face was originally young and tender, even though he was almost 29 years old. In this outfit, he looked like a college student who had just graduated. He was youthful and handsome. When the father and son stood together, they didn't look like father and son, but brothers. Little Yichen eagerly prepared a small school bag. This was his first time going on a trip with his daddy, and it was also his first time going to an amusement park. Thus, in his excitement, he brought over many desserts and snacks. Unfortunately, his school bag was not big enough to fit so many desserts and snacks. Looking at the bulging bag, Xiao Yichen hugged his arms and felt a little distressed. Muyaja helplessly took out all the snacks. Xiao Yichen's heart ached when he saw this. He bit his lip as if his heart was bleeding. He loved desserts, so afternoon tea was a must for him. Muyaja thought to himself, "There are many dessert stalls in the amusement park. It's the same if I buy desserts when I go in. However, it would be inconvenient to go in with a bag full of desserts." Chapter 401. Looking at Xiao Yichen's pitiful face, he did not explain further. When they entered the amusement park, the little guy would be so excited that he might even forget about the dessert. Even if he still missed it, he could just bring him to the dessert station. Even if he did not say anything, this was still a surprise. Thus, he put his wallet, a DV, and a phone charger into his bag. Everything was ready. Just like that, the father and son set off. When they arrived at the amusement park, it was already 11 o'clock. However, the number of people lining up at the entrance did not decrease. On the contrary, because it was Children's Day, there were still 2 long lines at the entrance. Fairy Tale Valley was the most famous amusement park in Beijing. It was jointly founded by Leji Holdings and NE Corporation. In the past 2 years, it had gathered a lot of popularity. After the 3rd phase of the project was developed, it attracted many parents to bring their children from afar. It even attracted many foreign children. Thus, Mu Yaja carried Xiao Yichen in one arm and carried his small bag in the other. Under the envious gazes of the crowd, he walked straight through the VIP passage. Oh my God! Look at that man. He's so handsome. Could he be a celebrity? No way. I've never seen such a handsome and stylish man in the entertainment industry. He's even carrying a child. He's a father at such a young age. Oh my God, what a young stay-at-home dad. How is that possible? This handsome guy looks like he's in his early 20s. How can he be a father? It's obvious that the child is his younger brother. If he's really a father, then I'm so envious of this child's mother. The father is handsome and the child is cute. She's a winner in life. Why doesn't he need to line up? Does he have special privileges? You don't know, right? He must have bought a VIP ticket. With a VIP ticket, there was no need to line up. However, the VIP ticket was very expensive, so most people would not choose to buy it. After all, a normal ticket was only 300 yuan, and a child ticket was half price. However, a VIP ticket, regardless of whether it was an adult or a child, was 3,000 yuan. Although it was expensive, the advantage of a VIP ticket was that not only did they not need to line up to get in, but all the paid activities in the park were also free. To put it simply, with 3,000 yuan, all the food, drinks, and entertainment in the amusement park would be free. Moreover, there would be a special VIP passage for the amusement park, so there would be no need to line up. For ordinary families, it might not be worth it. She brought her child to play a few games, but she couldn't play that many games. But for Mu Yaja, it was very worthwhile. The most important thing was that there was no need to wait in line. As soon as they entered the amusement park, Xiao Yichen was extremely excited. At the entrance to Fairy Tale Valley, there were 3 cute mascots, a fountain, a castle, and a parade. Everything was designed to look like a fairy tale world. Stepping in was like stepping into a fantasy world. Xiao Yichen said anxiously, Daddy, I want to come down. Okay. Mu Yaja put him down, and the little guy ran excitedly towards the parade. Wow. Daddy, take a look at this. It's Snow White. Xiao Yichen pointed at the holy and beautiful princess on the parade in surprise. Mu Yaja saw that he was so happy, and the corners of his lips curled up. Chapter 402. He didn't like to play in amusement parks. After all, he was an adult and had experience. No matter how dreamy the amusement park was, he would find it dull and boring. Seeing that little munchkin was happy, he naturally felt happy too. Mu Yaja brought him to play a few rides. There were many activities in Fairy Tale Valley. Generally speaking, in other children's parks, most of the activities were for children to play. After all, the activities that children could play were limited. However, Fairy Tale Valley was different. Some of the activities that children were prohibited from playing in other children's parks were allowed to play in Fairy Tale Valley even as young as 6 years old. However, the high-altitude rides weren't as high, the express rides weren't as fast, and the safety measures were more carefully designed. At first, Mu Yaja was worried that the little guy wouldn't be able to adapt to the more exciting rides. Thus, he brought him to try a few of the simpler rides, such as an indoor roller coaster, a 4D action movie, and so on. Throughout the ride, the little guy was overjoyed. His little face was flushed with excitement. At this moment, he could see some of the characteristics that a 6-year-old should have: carefree, naive, and unaffected. It turned out that the child's cold personality wasn't innate. It was because he lacked companionship. "Daddy, I want to play the Tong Tian Tower." Xiao Yichen pointed at the 30-meter tall tower not far away and suggested excitedly. Just as he said that, a heart-wrenching scream came from the tower. It was very exciting. "It's so tall. Aren't you afraid?" Mu Yaja frowned. Xiao Yichen looked fearless. He straightened his little body and said, "I'm not afraid. Daddy is here. Daddy will protect me. Okay, let's go." After saying that, he held little Munchkin's hand and walked towards the Tong Tian Tower. However, a surprised voice came from behind. "Brother Mu?" Mu Yaja turned around and saw a young woman holding a hydrogen balloon in her left hand and a 5-year-old girl in her right hand. She was walking towards him in surprise. The woman was pretty and slim. She looked to be in her early 20s. She had exquisite makeup on and was dressed very fashionably. If a discerning person's eyes were sharp enough, they would definitely be able to tell that the bag she was carrying on her shoulder was not cheap. The woman walked up to Mu Yaja with a gentle smile on her face. "Brother Mu, what a coincidence. Why are you here?" Mu Yaja was surprised to see her. Enya?" Xiao Yichen was feeling happy, but when he turned around and saw who it was, the happiness on his face quickly disappeared. How could it be them? The woman's name was Song Enya, and the little girl she was holding was her younger sister, Song Enshi. Mu Yaja had special feelings for Song Enya and doted on her in many ways. It was not because of anything else, but because Song Enya's mother was Jiang Qiming. Jiang Qiming was Jiang Yishan's younger sister, Song Zhengguo's wife, and the madam of the Song family. The Song family was one of the most prestigious families in the capital. They had been a scholarly family for over 100 years. When it came to Song Enya's grandfather's generation, he started a revolution. Old Song fought alongside the martyrs when he was young and was one of the 10 founding fathers of the country. One of the founding fathers. His position was very important. He had 2 sons. His eldest son, Song Jiangwo, was the chief of the capital's military and held a high position. His youngest son, Song Zhengguo, was the mayor of the capital and was also a big shot. Chapter 403. The Song family had many talents, especially Old Master Song, who was revered by many. Jiang Qiming and Song Zhengguo had a son and 2 daughters. The eldest son, Song Yunxi, was also a young and talented man. Although he was still young, he was already a lieutenant in the capital's military district. Therefore, Song Enya and Song Enshi were Mu Yaja's cousins. The reason why he took good care of his cousin was that Song Enya's facial features resembled Jiang Yishan's. They were very similar, especially in terms of their charm. There were a few times when he vaguely saw his mother in her younger days. After his mother passed away, little Enya stayed by his side day and night. Out of his longing for his mother, Song Enya was more like a spiritual sustenance to him. Song Enya smiled faintly as if she did not see Xiao Yichen standing at the side with a cold expression. She lowered her head and said to Song Enshi, "Enshi, why aren't you greeting Uncle Mu?" "Uncle Mu," Song Enshi called out sweetly. Her childish voice was full of delicateness. She did not care that Mu Yaja was holding Xiao Yichen's hand at the moment. She shook off Song Enya's hand and bounced in front of Mu Yaja, spreading her arms wide open and acting coquettishly. Uncle Mu, and she wants a hug, and she wants a hug." Xiao Yichen was obviously unhappy when he heard this. He secretly hated the Song sisters. Of all times, they appeared out of nowhere. Song Enshi especially wanted to snatch his daddy's embrace. Unforgivable. Just as he was cursing in his heart, Mu Yaja suddenly let go of his hand. Xiao Yichen nervously reached out to grab the man's hand, only to see him bend over slightly and lift Song Enshi up. Song Enshi nestled in Mu Yaja's embrace. The blissful expression on her face was as sweet as honey. She let out a bell-like laughter and was overjoyed. And she loves Uncle Mu the most. As she spoke in Mu Yaja's blind spot, she made a provocative face at Xiao Yichen, who looked annoyed. Xiao Yichen's face twisted even more. What was this? This was clearly a show of strength. What? Are you very proud of yourself? Was it that great? Was he so proud of seizing his daddy's favor? Song Enshi was the person Xiao Yichen hated the most. Not because of anything else, but because this little girl was very annoying. When she was 4 years old, Song Enya brought Song Enshi to the muse as a guest. Like many naughty children, Song Enshi caused trouble everywhere, perhaps due to her young and insensible age. How did the Song family educate their children? They must have spoiled them too much. Not only did they break Xiao Yichen's toys, they even broke an antique vase in the Mu residence. In the end, they even blamed it on Xiao Yichen. Xiao Yichen felt so wrong that he had no one to complain to. In the end, what else could he do? Even though the muse knew that Song Enshi was talking, they could not expose her openly. After all, the Songs were a scholarly family in the capital, and Old Master Song was one of the founding fathers of the country. They had to maintain a smooth surface. In private, Mr. Song naturally knew his daughter's character well. He knew that the antique vase must have been broken by Song Enshi, so he secretly gave the muse a lot of benefits and let the matter pass just like that. Although the matter was said to be over, it had always been a thorn in Xiao Yichen's heart.